Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is the Royalist Rook, and this here is my code developer. Say hello there, my friend.
Hello, everyone.
All right, and today we are, well, I would say rather hip deep in this project. It's been just about 2 years of work for me. I think coming up on 3 years at the beginning of this Christmas season for me, since I actually genuinely started putting myself into this. And then Sebastian, you joined me about a year ago now. Is that it?
I think we're coming on a year, just about. I think that's the amount of time that we've put into this on and off, but then more often, kind of getting back into it, and we've done a uh, hell of a lot of work.
We have indeed. This document here, this Google Doc that we have, is almost 100 pages. We are shy a single page for our plans here for what we have. I will say outright that TestW Remastered is well on its way to having a beta. The reason we're recording this today is simply because our egos have grown to astronomical size, and we have actually begun to do real work on the files. It's very, very difficult and draining work to change numbers and letters, but we are doing it. But what we decided to do here today is to simply put out something because several people have approached me about work on the project. They have approached me for progress updates, while I am still firmly in the camp of not giving a release date for literally anything. I will say we have actually completely finalized our choices for the factions that are going to be in the open beta. Sebastian, would you like to tell the good folks what the beta will be about?
Yes, I would love to. So the beta of our remaster is going to focus primarily around the central conflict of the Elder Scrolls V. Ideally, our beta will be out before Elder Scrolls 6. I think Elder Scrolls 6 is perhaps 3 to 7 more years away from coming out, so we should be fine. Um, we will also be contributing to the meme of Skyrim being released 13 different times because the select campaign of the beta is going to be the Skyrim Civil War. The three central factions for players to choose from are going to be the Empire of Cyrodiil, the Kingdom of Skyrim, and the Stormcloak Rebels.
Excellent, and that is something that has been near and dear to a lot of our hearts. I will be completely honest. My first knowledge and memory of the Elder Scrolls is watching my father buy the game close to midnight on 11/11/11, and sitting down and watching him desperately try to escape Helgen as he wondered why he couldn't move his hands. But so this was my introduction to the Elder Scrolls, and I've very much fallen in love with the entire franchise. I've actually played some of Oblivion. Sebastian here has played not only Oblivion, but also Morrowind and Daggerfall. And have you played Arena? I forget.
I have not gotten around to playing Arena yet, but my experiences with the Elder Scrolls are very parallel to yours. I was, let's see, 2011. I was about 9 years old in 2011, and some subsequent years later, I believe, I got into Skyrim through the YouTube scene. There was a massive modding and let's play scene of Skyrim that I promptly immersed myself in, and then played Skyrim ad nauseum as a child through late elementary through middle school, and then around high school. Actually, I'm sorry. Around middle school, I played through the main campaign of Oblivion, and then around high school through my years in college to now, I played Morrowind, and recently I had downloaded and begun playing Daggerfall Unity, which has been a very interesting time. It kind of turning the pages back on the Elder Scrolls series and getting to understand the roots of where a lot of the RPG elements that we love come from. And on the way, on the side, I've also been enjoying a lot of different Elder Scrolls mod projects for various different medieval role playing and strategy games because I think that the Elder Scrolls world is one of the sort of settings that can bring a lot of flavor and ubiquitous enjoyment to whatever kind of framework that you place it on.
Yes, and along that note, for my own personal experience, Elder Scrolls is one of those series of fantasy that it just encapsulates you with the quality of the work that is done, despite how old Morrowind may look, or how wacky Oblivion NPC dialogue may be, or how absolutely broken the Skyrim physics engine may be. The idea that the quality of the product is still maintained years later. I could play through Oblivion and still enjoy it. I still love reading Morrowind's ancient lore. It is so very fun to get into the Elder Scrolls, and that is part of the reason why we're doing this project together. I started this project because the original Elder Scrolls Total War, it is a phenomenal project. It is done very, very well. The world map, the battle maps, the ideas, the philosophy behind a lot of the decisions for each faction, the groundwork has been laid. Unfortunately, there's no house on that groundwork. And this remaster, many years after the original mod's release, seeks to elevate the original project, to polish it up, to sort of smooth out its rough edges, and bring the entire idea of Elder Scrolls Total War away from the unofficial patch, because I don't fully agree with all the decisions made with the unofficial patch, but I don't deride them for any of that. They did a lot of good work, but I am taking this based on the original project and simply elevating it beyond what it currently is. And that is why we decided to sit down and give a little progress update, because the page has been up since October of last year. Many people have expressed interest in seeing about this, and so I think we're actually ready to cover a singular faction, the Empire of Cyrodiil. Now, for those of you that have been listening to us ramble for the last several minutes, you may have already thoroughly read everything on your screen, as well as some of the cliff notes on the left for different sections. You see that, oh, the Vampire Lords of Northpoint is a faction. If you read over some of the text on the ModDB page, you will understand that there is indeed a new faction named the Vampire Clans. We will cover that when we get to it, but they will not be in the beta. But that's just a little taste of the things we're going to give. So if you will pardon me for a moment, Sebastian, as I continue to hog the mic, I shall simply go over the general philosophy for the Empire of Cyrodiil in our project. So, the Empire is the preeminent faction in the Elder Scrolls universe. It is the strongest kingdom of men and has risen multiple times out of the ashes of history to conquer all of Tamriel. The greatest heroes come from the Empire, and the roster reflects this. The general philosophy of the Empire is that of well-balanced, high-quality infantry. The Imperial Legion is one of the finest fighting forces in the lore, and as such, the core of their military should not be easily beaten. Designed with a focus on holding against the enemy and beating them through sheer force of arms, the Empire is intended to have some of the best units in the game available in their starting roster that are able to handle a variety of units. Though they have options to handle everything, they lack the specialty to thoroughly defeat every other faction. Although they contain very elite units at the higher tiers, the Legion is intended to be less flexible than other factions and rather one-dimensional. Eagle-eyed players will note the lack of options within the roster, as the Imperial Legion is almost entirely infantry, with very few cavalry, archers, and magicians to back them up. This is intentional, as the Empire will be designed to ally with or conquer other nations in Tamriel and receive units from other rosters to augment their forces. The weakness of the Empire is what it has always been: too much territory and too many enemies to focus on at once. Regardless of what ancillary units may be added in the future, if the player is ever to engage the Empire at its best, it should be a difficult fight, and the sight of any Imperial Legion troops should make the player groan, as they know it's going to be a real fight. Now, Sebastian, you are a very deep fan of Elder Scrolls lore and the philosophical side of each faction and the real life influences that they draw from. So, if you wouldn't mind, please explain to the good folks at home exactly what our philosophy is from your perspective when designing the Imperial roster.
Well, the Imperial roster is definitely going to be one that reflects a sort of imminent historical vibe, as it were, comparatively to a faction more like the clans and the houses of Morrowind, which are going to have a lot more fantastical units. The Empire, I think, is the much needed everyman faction within a fantasy series, and the idea that surrounded by gods, monsters, Daedra, and all sorts of threats, the human can persevere through intellect and prowess. And we want that to reflect very much in the Empire and their mastery of warfare. I think it was the original description of the High Elves, the High Elven faction in the original Elder Scrolls Total War mod, which described uh, Aldmeris as having one of the greatest fighting forces in Tamriel. And we wanted to shift away from that to specialize Aldmeris to a more ancient elven sort of magical elite sort of idea and transfer the idea of the greatest fighting force to Cyrodiil. And so in this, Cyrodiil is going to have a lot of the Skyrim based fare. It's going to be a sort of fantastically mechanized kind of Roman faction. And by that, I mean plate armor will be present on a lot of the Centurion units. There will be pike formations and a lot of the base Med 2 lovely mechanics and tactics, whilst having the sort of Roman flair introduced in Skyrim that we have come to associate with them. However, I will say, in terms of people who miss the Oblivion style or earlier fantasy style of Cyrodiil as martial humans who potentially have more of a medieval aesthetic as opposed to the Roman one, I would say do not fear. We have some plans in mind for that that are going to allow Cyrodiil to be a great fighting force, no matter what potential aesthetic that you go for in their units.
Indeed, indeed. So, as mentioned here in the general philosophy, the main focus of the Empire has and always will be the Imperial Legion. The idea that the Empire, every faction needs a leg up, whether it is economically, whether it is militarily, whether it is having a couple of specific generals. For example, the faction Dagoth, will simply be powerful because it has a lot of magic that just completely immolates anybody that comes even close. In addition to like breaking morale, the Ashwalkers of the great Lord Dagoth Ur are just going to be able to ruin the morale of other factions. But with the Empire specifically, the idea is your infantry, pound for pound, can almost always beat other infantry, and the very specific factions that can go toe to toe with you are factions like the Aldmeri Dominion, the higher tier levels of the tribes of the Orisimer. We're talking about people are going to need to bring their top tier stuff to beat you, because let's be completely honest. For those of you that have played the original Elder Scrolls Total War, the Empire gets steamrolled by literally everyone. I played a game as the Stormcloaks where half of the Empire was taken over by House Sadras. House Sadras. Like, what? How? Yuenwa. So my point here is that the game heavily favors, as far as the game's code is concerned, those of you who have a wide experience with Med2's engine, they highly favor unit count and they highly favor high quality stat lines. For those of you fans of Divide and Conquer, the Lord of the Rings submod for Third Age Total War, you guys are very, very familiar with the Isengard steamroll. How Rohan, one of the best factions in the game, if controlled by the player, gets absolutely bodied by Isengard's heavy infantry. The Empire is going to have a little bit of a leg up as far as auto resolve is concerned, because their units are just going to be that good. Speaking of units being that good, Sebastian, I think it's time we actually get into the roster.
I would be happy to. I would love that.
So this, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a full breakdown of everything we have in the faction, from the roster to the buildings to the scripts. And again, as I said at the beginning of the video, we are in the middle of implementing these changes. This is not just, oh, we've sat down for 5 minutes and typed out some fun idea. No, we are actually hoping to get these out in a beta relatively soon. Soon, trademarked, meaning several months, years, whatever, hopefully before Elder Scrolls 6.
Bethesda
But
too.
uh, yes, yes, indeed. So let's actually cover the very first unit here, the Imperial Guardsmen. Now, Sebastian, would you just like to lay the joke out on the table for the party?
Uh, yeah. There are no commissars, no bolt guns, and we are not going to be executing our men for retreating. But we are paying homage to the Warhammer universe by calling the first tier of the Legion the Imperial Guardsmen. They are your bread and butter. They will throw their lives on the line, and they will defend the Empire with their body, soul, and their steel. As will the Imperial Guardsmen of 40K. Please don't copyright strike us. It's just a fun little reference.
It is. It is one of maybe several, but it's definitely the most direct 40k reference. So the unit description, as it says there, these men are recruited from the many holds of the Empire, tasked with guarding the cities and trade routes from Leoween to Anvil. Used to dealing with petty thievery and drunken brawls, the guardsmen serve as excellent garrison units for the thinly spread Imperial military. Though not well trained in the art of war, these men can be called upon by the Empire to fight in times of great need. The unit starts at 320 coins to recruit, and the upkeep is 180. Sebastian and I have decided on an upkeep system that focuses primarily around cutting the upkeep cost to be half of the actual cost. Although you see here, for the Legion, a specific focus of the Legion that is not really stated anywhere in the code is that the upkeep costs are a little bit higher. We said earlier that we want to kind of base this off of Rome, the citizen soldier, and those of you who are very astute historians will know that citizen soldiery were expected to provide a lot of their own gear. Unfortunately, we want to put a little bit more of a kibosh on that for the Legion. You have some of the best units in the game. If you're watching this after the beta has released, you will notice that the stat line on this unit is actually rather impressive for a starting trash unit. The Empire has no trash. We took his clothes and his trash. So the Sebastian, if you wouldn't mind reading through the basic stat line for the guardsmen.
Yes, so the guardsmen are going to come in units of 201 soldiers per assigned unit. They will have an attack of 7, a charge bonus of 3. They will obviously be a melee starting unit. They will have a total defense of 10 points, 4 of that being armor, 3 of that being defense skill, and 3 of that owing to shield. They will have 1 hit point, and their focus are going to be having decent morale and decent stamina. As we've said, they are the backbone or the general bread and butter of the startup imperial military, but they are no less effective and they are no less as impressive comparatively than their brothers in much better plate armor.
Indeed. Sort of the balance that we're trying to strike here is both the balance of Medieval 2 Total War's original idea, the standard sword and board versus pikes versus spears versus bows, crossbows, cavalry, light cavalry, all that great balance that every Total War player knows by heart. And I will just straight up admit that a lot of our work is heavily inspired by Divide and Conquer. We have played that mod for years, and so the Empire's starting units were with the idea in mind of both Rome and the Kingdom of Gondor. The sort of a power level to start out is like, hey, the base sword and board unit for the Empire should be able to pretty much hold against anything else, and that's why a 10 defensive thing for a starting unit. Again, the Empire has no trash, and especially 4 armor. For those of you familiar with DAC, good archers start around 3 archery missile damage, and so 4 armor with a 3 shield to start out will make the Imperial Guardsmen alone pretty resilient to arrow fire. And with that, I think we're ready to move on to the Imperial Sergeants. So I'll let you handle the good boys with the kite shield, Sebastian.
Though the sword is a popular weapon among the guards of the Empire, the appeal of a larger shield and a long spear is undeniable. More disciplined than their guardsmen counterparts, sergeants understand and adopt the idea of holding a solid shield wall, ready to defend what they hold dear. While armored enough to hold a battle line, these troops will begin to melt away in prolonged combat.
All right. The Imperial Sergeants start at 280 with an upkeep of 170. If we are to scroll back up here, you'll notice that they are just a tad bit cheaper than the Imperial Guardsmen, but that is because their stat line offensively is abysmal. They have an attack of 4 and a charge of 2. Their total defense is 14. They actually get 4 armor, 5 in defense skill, and 5 shield. These are your line holders. 14 defense is nothing to sneeze at all. These are literally your anti-cavalry line troops. Very early on, like we said with the guardsmen and the sergeants are supposed to form that line, and the guardsmen are supposed to be that very basic hammer, and the sergeants are the anvil. It gives the Empire access to very, very good early cav. Sebastian, you and I have played both Med 2 and DAC enough to know if they what should the player expect if they charge light cavalry into Imperial sergeants?
Complete and utter annihilation.
Yes, it is. The Legion trains their people well. They are not intimidated by a light cavalry charge. Now, obviously, high tier knights will just blast through sergeants. But the idea is that any attempt at charging the lines and outflanking the lines of the Legion will result in death for those involved. And so I think we're actually ready to move on to the first cavalry unit of the Empire, one of very few, but the Imperial Scouts, used by the Empire for patrol of their vast territories and quick flanking maneuvers against the enemies of the Emperor. These light cavalry are excellent for harassing archers and running down fleeing foes. Though able to provide a decent charge considering their light equipment, these horsemen should not be relied upon to break the enemy with a full frontal assault and are best used in a supporting role. Cavalry is king. All of us know that. All of us understand that. And so cavalry is expensive. 380 coins and a 200 coin upkeep with 76 men in the cavalry unit. As many of you familiar with the Elder Scrolls Total War know, the developers decided to give every single unit of cavalry 2 hit points. The developers decided to give every single unit of cavalry 2 hit points. It is utterly broken. And so Sebastian and I have decided to nix that idea and simply go with a solid, relatively light cavalry unit. You will notice that the Imperial Scouts have a 7 charge bonus on top of their 4 attack. Very specifically, they are going to be armed with light spears. They are not going to have lances of any kind, and they're not going to have swords. They're going to have light spears specifically in the code. So they will be good at chasing other units down. They will not hold long in prolonged melee. They can if you need them to, but they will rapidly begin to die. And they have a 5 armor. To be completely honest, that 5 armor and 3 shield, it's not going to save them because of the simple size of their hitboxes. Any archery unit is going to be able to pick these scouts off relatively quickly. Again, they are useful for running down archers and fleeing units, and that's pretty much all you should be using them for outside of garrison duty. Scouts, they scout. So now let's actually get into the proud Imperial Legion. So Sebastian, I'll let you start us off with the big boys.
All right. Just center the text on my screen really quickly. I'm just trying to not...
You're good. The Imperial Legionaries.
Drawn from the many lands controlled by the Emperor, these warriors are battle-hardened and ready to spread the influence of the Empire from Morrowind to the Somerset Isles, from Redguards traveling from distant Hammerfell to the Nords of frigid Skyrim. All who swear loyalty to the crown serve in the Legion. To assist them in this mighty undertaking, they are armed with thick chainmail, steel weapons, and the strength and courage to spread the might of Talos across all Tamriel.
All right, so because this is the Legion, and the Legion are your darlings, Sebastian, would you like to fully break down the unit as well as our philosophy with these guys?
I would be happy to. I understand that in describing the Legion as never having trash, we might provoke some question of what is their weakness? And the answer to that is they are a highly skilled group with very skilled units who are generally specialized to line fighting. Now, historically, if you look at accounts of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest or any particular Roman defeats by less advanced quote-unquote armies, the trick is to not fight them in a line. However, the strength of these Imperial Legionaries are if you do happen to be put in a situation in which you must fight them in a line, it is not going to go well for you. And so our stack for these Imperial Legionaries is going to reflect that. Again, they are the might and pride of the Emperor. They are the soldiers that are not going to be at the back of the lines in a triumph or a parade, but they are going to be there, and you will see the sun glint off their armor, and hopefully you will never face them in combat. And if you do, hopefully you don't have to fight them face to face. Ideally, that is the best way to to not have to suffer the wrath of the Emperor with these legionaries. And for this reason, these legionaries start at a cost of 500 for recruitment and 250 upkeep. So that is the straight split down the middle for the upkeep to cost ratio. They come at 151 soldiers per unit. They start with an attack stat of 12 and a charge bonus of 4. Obviously, they are melee sword and board. Their total defense is 16 starting, with a 7 armor, a 5 defense skill, and 4 shield rating. Each has 1 hit point, and as a in keeping with the tradition of being an improvement from the Imperial Guardsmen, they are going to have improved morale and improved stamina. These are people who it's going to take quite a bit to break this line of sort of rigid shields.
Indeed, these are the straight up legionaries. These are the again the quintessential fake Roman soldier that the original writers for the Elder Scrolls were trying to show. So the Imperial roster is just this is your standard unit. Once you get your second tier barracks, you're making these boys, and they are going to kill everything that is not of higher tier or better. Armor piercing will be relatively effective against them because especially an armor piercing charge against the legionaries is going to be pretty rough. But the idea here is that in a normal line combat, they just kill. And on that note, speaking of the line, we have the first pike unit for the Empire. I believe the only pike unit that they have, the Imperial Pikemen. Drilled to a professional standard and able to hold a stalwart line, the Empire hosts pikemen to assist in resisting any enemy charge. Able to unhorse a rider or block a key choke point, these soldiers nonetheless require strong support lest the foe try to flank them and render their holding action useless. Their cost is 400 but 190 for upkeep, as these make excellent garrison units, and having a good number of them is a very decent thing to have. They have 151 men in the unit. They have a attack stat of 5 and a total defense of 9, 5 of which being in armor, and they can indeed form a spear wall. To the uninitiated, pikemen of this caliber may seem pretty bad. They technically have a worse stat line than the Imperial Guardsmen. Those of you who know what pikes can do will look at this and say that is a perfectly acceptable pike unit. For those of you that do not know, leaving pikemen in the shield wall formation in the defensive stance where you click on the shield icon and have them in guard mode, the pikemen cannot and will not move when they are attacked, and the enemy infantry cannot physically get past the line of pikes, and unless the cavalry is heavy cavalry, they cannot either. There have been entire battles in Divide and Conquer and in Medieval 2 where I've edited the files to take away the swords of the pikemen, where pikemen just hold the whole battle and refuse to die. Sebastian, you quite enjoy playing Scotland. You've had a great experience with your pikemen.
Following the Scottish campaign I played, in which we fought against Denmark, who were leaning very heavily on their Viking charge infantry, and England, who were relying on their cavalry for some reason, taking cities, especially city sieges of Scotland, with the general bug fix of the pikemen, is a beauty to behold. There is very little as satisfying as a hail of arrows flying over a great pike wall. And this is the exact idea that we want to replicate with the Legion. It is the idea of your lines being unbreakable. However, if you cannot think tactically past line combat, or you cannot adapt your lines to fit the very interesting sort of flavors that will come at you in terms of enemies in the Elder Scrolls world, your empire is going to suffer some defeats. It is the idea of strong in certain areas, and that is what our general philosophy is. We want to have a realistic sense of armies with strengths and specializations, but with potential downsides dependent on the terrain and the enemy.
Something that many players understand is that unlike Medieval 2, where basically every roster is shared, or Divide and Conquer, where most rosters are pretty one note, not to insult the developers, they did an amazing job with what they did, but with these Imperial pikemen, they are going up against elves that have missile damage that outclasses their armor by magnitudes. They are going up against magicians. They are going up against monsters, like we're talking troll level enemies or magical monsters that just utterly decimate. So against normal units, the pikemen will do perfectly fine. But under sustained archer fire from some of the more archer proficient nations, or from flanks from cavalry focused nations, the pikemen are going to fall apart. But again, it's just the idea of a professional military force. You need to have a pike unit, and that's what we gave for the Empire here. So Sebastian, I will go ahead and give you the Imperial Auxiliaries, and then I will give you the next unit after that, as you and I both sort of came up with that unit together, and we're very proud of them. But for now, the Auxiliaries.
All right. While many in the Legion seek glory and adventure, many seek to protect hearth and home. Facing a myriad of different cultures with different styles of war, the Empire has elected to create the Auxiliaries, a support force for the Imperial Legion that ensures any territory they take is patrolled and maintained. Armed with long spears and heavy armor, these men will die before they allow the Empire to face defeat. Um, if you'll recall, we do try to use the naming conventions that are generally in line with what you're presented in Skyrim. It's a little different because you get the choice between light, medium, and heavy armor, and there's a classification based on those choices in Skyrim. But generally, we want it to feel pretty seamless in that as you're getting these units, there's an understanding of what they do and how they are. And so with the auxiliaries, these are your next upgrade, as it were, in spear units. So they will start at the cost of 490. Their upkeep will be 230, which is about half, not exactly. They will be 151 soldiers to each unit with an attack of 9 and a charge bonus of 4. They are your spear and shield units, so they will be melee. They will have a total defense of 20 with 7 points to armor, 7 points to defense skill, and 6 points to their shield, overall with 1 hit point. And they are going to. Same with the Legion compared to the Guardsmen. They will have improved morale and improved stamina to their lesser tier counterpart. And then they will keep that cavalry fighting bonus. So if charging if a rebel faction were to charge light cavalry into your imperial sergeants, it would not end well for them. If they were to charge their rebel light cavalry into Imperial auxiliaries, it would be a complete massacre.
There would be literally, I would expect the player honestly to have very little result. I would expect the player to watch their 151 soldiers drop down to like 148, and then the entire cavalry unit to die. In particular, there is a direct inspiration for this unit's stat line and the idea of it. For those of you that have played the expansions to the original Medieval 2 Total War, my personal favorite expansion, the Teutonic expansion. Everybody remembers the Order Spearmen, the attack of 9 and defense of 20 spear unit that is absolutely broken that the Teutonic Order gets. That is the point here. The Imperial Legion and the Imperial Auxiliaries together are meant to be this powerful, but considering those were the much higher tier of spearmen for a Teutonic faction in Med 2, that should give sort of an idea for the balance that we're hoping to achieve here. I don't believe we have any unit that has broached the 25 to 30 marker for any one stat of attack or total defense, but we are looking to have stuff that can indeed beat this, the high level of stat, because these guys with a 6 shield and 7 armor, they're going to take virtually any missile fire that you can throw at them. The only real way to beat them would be good armor piercing or a flanking charge from heavy cav. As Sebastian and I well know, it doesn't matter how good the unit is. A flanking charge from a heavy knight unit will completely decimate almost any infantry in this game, and that is the whole deal about the, as he explained earlier with the Empire, is you can't beat them in a head-on fight. You gotta win tactically. So Sebastian, would you like to explain to the good folks at home about the prefects? We will get to the Imperial Legion archers in just a moment, but I did promise you the prefects right now.
Absolutely, yes. So, our prefects are as such. Soldiers of the Legion who have served a long career and performed deeds of heroism are promoted to prefect, an elevated position that allows them to better serve their officers and commanders. Better equipped than other members of the army, these men serve as a rallying point to the other men and an inspiration to maintain the field when all seems lost. These are, in fact, your uh, upper tier of sword and board infantry. They are going to be your sort of next step in promotion. These are, as it were, the sort of uh, promoted officers of a given legion and the subsequent sort of units that there would be in a Roman style army. Uh, and as such, it reflects in their cost of 730 with their upkeep of 360. Um, Each is 151 soldiers still to each unit with an attack of 16 points and a charge bonus of 6. Their total defense will be 21 overall, with 10 points to armor, 6 to defense skill, and 6 to shield. This is the next upgrade, obviously, in their military abilities. So the morale and the stamina boosts are consistent. They will have excellent morale and stamina, being what you would imagine as nigh unbreakable as the great infantry unit. And their speciality will be forming the shield wall. So that sort of idea of the testudo, or locking the scutum together as the square shield and just becoming that sort of what you see in Skyrim based sort of fan artworks of Imperial versus Stormcloak battles, the Imperials forming that unbreachable line of wood and steel. This is precisely the unit that will be able to do that for you.
Indeed. The real inspiration from this unit, to give people a bit more context within the veil of the project, is the idea of late game Med 2. Your armies, at least for the Western Christian nations, are dismounted feudal knights and heavy spearmen, backed up by a few units of dismounted chivalric knights. It's very difficult to get full stacks of just chivalric and dismounted chivalric knights. You usually throw in, especially those who are in the Med 2 multiplayer scene, you'll always throw in one or two dismounted chivalric knights with your dismounted feudal knights, because it's simply like a nice extra step up infantry that you can afford to spend extra on. The prefects fill that role for the Imperial Legion. Your legionaries are your actual Imperial Legion or your heavy infantry. The prefects are the step up to really hold that center of the line and just be that much better. And now I think it's time we move away from infantry and focus on the the singular archer unit. I believe it's the singular archer unit that the Empire gets, and I will cover these boys. The Imperial Legionnaire archers. With hard battles come harder men, and these archers are some of the hardest. Accustomed to war on foreign soil, the archers of the Imperial Legion have seen it all and are more than equipped to handle anything thrown at them. Armed with solid bows and steel-tipped arrows, the legates of the Empire can rest easy, knowing that their armies will fall long before they reach Imperial lines. The upkeep for this unit is 300 with a cost of 600. This, again, is your only real archer unit, because this is a area that will be filled in by other factions, and they will only be available in the mid tier. We'll get into which buildings can recruit them later, but as it stands, the idea for the Imperial Legionnaire archers is just to be an excellent hybrid unit, because every boy that trains with a bow is still a legionary. The idea is that they can fight afterwards if need be. So they have a 151 men in the unit, an attack of 9, a missile attack of 7. Those eagle-eyed of you will know that is a very high missile stat, and it is one of the highest missile stats that's going to be available to any faction of humans in the Elder Scrolls. The total defense is going to be 16, 10 of which is in armor. Like we said before with the Empire of Cyrodiil, the point is specifically to be that solid baseline. And so the Imperial Legionnaire archers are designed to be shot back at. That 10 armor is going to stop most missile units from simply shooting the Legionnaire archers down, because Legionnaire archers are already hard enough to get and they're very pricey. We wanted to sort of give the idea that the Legion protects those who choose to use the bow. And so essentially you not only have a very good hybrid archer melee unit, but they're not just going to get annihilated, except by, I don't know, magic, which is a thing in this setting and will be the hard counter to Legionnaire archers, in addition to a cavalry charge as a standard. One final note I will say is that for those that prefer it, they have flaming missiles. I do not like flaming missiles. I think they are a waste of time, because it is a chance to instantly kill the unit whenever the missile hits, and it has a bonus effect on morale. In my opinion, shooting arrows faster is enough of a morale effect, and I don't need to instantly kill my enemies when I'm killing them twice as fast. So, but the Legionnaire archers will have flaming missiles, just so they have that little extra edge, so that in case you're, like, for example, fighting a siege defense, you can break the enemy that much faster as the Legion.
Or destroy a siege tower potentially.
Yes, I've very rarely seen that work, but that is, again, that is the point of the flaming missiles, is so
Keeps
that
happening to me every time. There was one Spanish campaign where we were taking like Corsica or one of those islands, and one of the walls had a single unit of flaming arrow users, and every time you get that siege tower close, it goes up. It like Tinder, it just goes up, and you can't stop it. But my my traumas aside, a lot of people may be wondering why the Imperial Legion don't have access to crossbows, and our general reasoning for that is, well, for one, crossbows historically are a sort of great technological improvement. However, they do not particularly lend to great mass production. And in the sort of militaristic culture that the Cyrodiilic Empire is in, it is not too much to ask that the relevant soldiery train in archery. And also in Skyrim, sadly, we do only see legionnaires depict using the Imperial bow or the Colovian bow, as opposed to the crossbow, which is a more specialized weapon by the time of Elder Scrolls. So we're trying to keep that balance of practicality, historical realism, and, well, historical influence, practicality, and then also just general Elder Scrolls lore. But these archers are going to be a good support to a mostly very strong all round faction, as opposed to providing this great armor piercing ranged unit. However, that is not the case for all versions of Cyrodiil, as we might get into later.
We will indeed. And the only thing I'll throw onto that is it's very cool to stick a 15th century steel crossbow in the hands of a Roman legionary. It's also really cool to see them dressed up on the back of a U.S. Humvee with a 50 cal and say, Brutus, kill those barbarians. But at the same time, like he said, these archers are just going to be as lore accurate as possible. I believe it's a good time to touch on that point. We are going to try to stay lore accurate. And by lore accurate, I do mean everything seen in the games, including stuff seen in the Elder Scrolls Online. We are going to take from both sources, but for example, a lot of fan made mods, a lot of projects in the Creation Club, even though they're technically canon, we are going to try to stick as close to we can as the original design intentions of the factions, meaning that the Imperial Legion is a developed military. They do not use crossbows because, again, we see that almost nowhere. And in the mod and in Elder Scrolls in general, crossbows are just a very rare thing. So they will be given to certain nations, and it will be a standout feature of those nations that they have crossbows. But on that note, now we get to the big boys. So, would you like to talk about the preeminent heavy cavalry unit for the Empire of Cyrodiil, Sebastian?
I sure would. Anyone who knows the towards the end of the Oblivion campaign knows that the General Imperial Knights are going to get heavier and heavier armor, and they're going to get more and more promotion. In keeping with that, we have our first unit of the Imperial Knight Protectors. So, legendary warriors who have held the forces of Oblivion at bay, these troops are the best the Empire can muster. Their will is fully realized on the field of battle, and they swear that the word of the Emperor will be done. Armed with a full set of plates and the finest sword and shield, the Knights of the Legion will rush headlong into any conflict, whether their foes be the proud soldiers of Brittany or the hordes of Mehrunes Dagon himself. And the first very glaring thing will be the cost of 1,200. It is a quite large jump from the 730, but it is well worth it. Their upkeep is going to be 650, so generally keeping with half and some change. There will be 101 to each unit with attack stats of 16, charge bonus of 5. They will be using sword and shield, so they will be sword and shield cavalry, not lance cavalry.
My apologies as I step in for my co-developer here. I got a little too excited about this project. Knight Protectors are infantry, and the next unit as well is infantry, and then we will get to the Knights of the Imperial Dragon, I believe, is the actual cavalry unit. So Sebastian, my apologies. These are sword and
You're
board
absolutely right.
infantry.
Knight Protectors are, in fact, going to be sword and board infantry, yes. A 1200 sword and board infantry to show their quality. Knight Protectors
Yeesh.
are going to be dismounted in the tradition of having heavily armored dismounted knights units. So it will still stand 101 soldiers to each unit with an attack stat of 15, a charge bonus of 5, and using sword and board melee. They will have the total defense of 28, which is a great whopping number, but it will be from 12 points in armor, 9 points in the defense skill, 7 points in shield, and with an overall hit point of 1. And these will not be able to have a shield wall. However, they will have effectively some of the best morale and stamina that the Imperial troops can have.
These are literally the people that you see in Oblivion. Now, for those of you that have played Oblivion and understand how wacky and weird it can be, the same guy that when he catches you says that he'll make captain for this. Yes, that is the same guy that this unit is based off of. You will see that the models for these guys are the full Oblivion plate armor. But the idea here is that these infantry are going to be the best of the best. I lied earlier when we said we didn't have anything that breached the 25 to 30 number for defense or attack, because again, the Legion is the best. I will not let it suffer any rival as far as actual raw stats are concerned, but at the end of the day, these are sword and shield infantry, and the cost, like Sebastian noted, 1,200 for an infantry unit of 100 men. I said this was the last Warhammer reference we'd be making, but I feel like Games Workshop and charging you this much for this many models.
Well, what's funny is if you look up Imperial Knight Protectors, the first results are actually a Warhammer unit.
Yes, yes, indeed. So Knight Protectors are just your line. They will not die. Speaking of things that will not die, how about we move on to things that will make other things die? The Imperial Blade Masters. The gods gave man 2 hands, and these elite shock troops choose to use them both for their weapons. Itching to charge into the fray, these men of Cyrodiil are some of the finest warriors in all of Tamriel. Equally ready to face down the Dunmer of Morrowind as their notorious foes in the Aldmeri Dominion, the Blade Masters will carve a bloody swathe through anyone foolish enough to stand in their way. Excuse me. The cost of the Blade Masters, $13.50, and their upkeep is $725. I hope you have some free upkeep buildings in your settlements, because you're going to need them. 101 soldiers in this unit. The attack stat is 20. The charge stat is 8. The total defense stat is 22, with 12 of that being in armor and 10 of that being in defense skill. These men have excellent morale, excellent stamina, are going to have an enhanced charge, and are armor-piercing shock troops. Sebastian, is there any unit in our over a year of game design that you think could take the Blade Masters in a head-on fight?
A head-on fight. Let's see. Well, short of a short of some terrific, horrible, magical unit. I think the Order of the Virtuous Blood got a shot.
We will get into that in a minute. But the point of the Blade Masters is to, as the meme says in the unit description, the gods gave you 2 hands and you use them both for your weapon. They will respect that. So the Blade Masters are just the absolute epiphany of shock troops. The Empire does not get any armor piercing in their roster except for these men, which is why at the very top of your roster, we decided to give you a single shock troop that will pretty much just eat everything else. The only other factions that could really destroy these guys, and again, it leads back to the whole idea of internal lore balance, is good archers that specifically have armor-piercing arrows, a solid cavalry charge from behind once these Blade Masters are tied up, and even in that case, infantry that are armor piercing, not necessarily shock troops, but for example, a sword and board infantry that has armor piercing in it, that would be able to initially take this charge, would actually begin to whittle the Blade Masters down a little bit. So there is a counter, but not much. So
yes,
now,
and generally, as if you could pardon my interruption, as very strong as these units are, we did keep a general thing in mind of wanting each faction to stand a chance against the Empire, especially if they lean into their Imperial counters. So, for instance, if say there were perhaps an Elven faction with highly specialized archers that lived in ambush terrain, you could very much repel an Imperial invasion from your borders. Or if you were perhaps an elf who preferred slavery and lots of destructive magic, it would be viable.
I
If you
don't know what you're
invested
talking about, Enwa.
if you invested the right amount of men into the right garrisons and on the right border territories, you could still easily repel an Imperial invasion. But it is a matter of accommodating, and so that I think would be the difference, in that with other factions you can get your best units, and their best units and just see who can win through tactics. With the Empire, you might have to do a little maneuvering. You might have to be more careful of what they're bringing to the table and how they fight and adapt to that. But it does not mean that they are unbeatable by any means.
Indeed. Speaking of unbeatable, let's move on to my personal baby and my biggest problem child with this entire thing. It's like a petulant, disobedient child that you have. You simply tell them, "I love you very much. I just don't like you right now." And that is the Imperial Battle Mages. The magic system in this game is frankly broken. Anybody who has spent as much time as I have playing as Great House Dagoth, please don't stare at me. I've only played their campaign 4 times in a row. With the magic, I have had an entire stack of mages wipe out 4 separate factions by itself. So magic is going to be very heavily neutered. Those of you who know how powerful magic can be in Elder Scrolls know that there are technically 2 types. There is the sort of jury-rigged javelin magic, and then there is what I call cannonball magic, where you huck a massive fireball over that literally, no matter how many hit points something has, it instantly dies in a massive area of effect. Silt Striders do not matter when fighting as House Dagoth, because you simply have your Ash spawn just throw cannonballs at them and they instantly die. So the focus for magic in general is to heavily neuter it. Very few factions will have access to the cannonball magic. In fact, I think the only one I've discussed having that is House Dagoth, and it is very specifically on just Dagoth himself, so that it is a potent unit, but so that you cannot stack spam that level of magical power. But the focus for the Empire will be highly inspired by the Arcane University. So I will simply read the Battle Mages and explain their purpose in the roster. Students of the Arcane University in Imperial City, these men have left their tomes and libraries to take up arms in defense of the Empire. Wearing solid plate armor and wielding sharp swords as backup weaponry, the true power of these mages lies in their rather destructive capabilities. Though not as potent as other magic users in the far-flung reaches of Tamriel, the mages in service to the Emperor enjoy a more focused form of casting, able to strike their foes from afar while the Legion meets them in battle. There are 80 soldiers with 1 hit point in the Imperial Battle Mages. They cost 1,500 per unit, and there are 750 coins of upkeep required every single turn. Those mages do not like to dine on anything but wine and cheese. They have a melee attack of 5, a missile attack of 15, and a total defense of 13, 10 of which is in armor. They have excellent morale and stamina, and their missiles are long range and armor piercing. So to give a basic explanation of what magic actually does, we have to tell the poor people at home that magic uses the gunpowder stat line for Medieval 2 when applying to the project. The idea here is that it takes half of the armor stat and half of the shield stat out of the equation when it has the gunpowder idea. So keep in mind there that the point of gunpowder units is the point of magic units in this project. So Imperial Battle Mages are going to essentially be the longbowmen of magic users across all of Tamriel. As magic is getting very heavily nerfed, what makes the Battle Mages special is the fact that they can simply shoot at extreme range for a very long time. They're also going to have quite a bit of ammunition so that they can outshoot other mages on the battlefield for quite a while. And they will also be able to outrange any other magic unit. Essentially, I want to have it be to the point where you hit start battle, and the Imperial Battle Mages immediately wind up. Sebastian and I have joked about that many times, about a Telvanni army suddenly encountering these barbaric Imperials and their pitiful excuse for mages. So the point of the Battle Mage, again, is just to be the sniper. The Empire does not have the patience nor the time to deal with magic, and so the Battle Mages of the Arcane University are just going to enforce their bans on the rest of Tamriel by force. Now, as I alluded to earlier, the most expensive unit in the project, and the premier cavalry unit of the Empire, Sebastian. Please talk to us about your Knights of the Imperial Dragon.
The finest mounted cavalry in all the Empire, the riders of Colovia thunder across the plains, their heavy armor and stout lances promising a swift end to those who would stand in their way. Accustomed to overwhelming odds and exemplifying the concept of knights in shining armor, Cyrodiil's finest will never crack. Astride the hardiest horses and wielding the best weaponry available, these men charge through the enemy lines, echoing their eternal call: Remember the Emperor. These are the Knights of the Imperial Dragon, and if I am correct, the armor of the Imperial Dragon is the armor set that you receive at the end of the Oblivion campaign. I may be wrong about that, but I believe that that's correct. They will be at the insane cost of 1,800 for a unit with a 900 upkeep. So that is an even split half upkeep. There will be 76 of these knights to a unit with 15 overall attack and an 18 stat bonus in charge. They will use melee. Is that going to be lance melee or sword and shield?
They are going to have lance and is going to be backed up by sword and shield.
Perfect. And so they will have a total defense of 30 along with that, an armor skill of 16 points, a defense skill of 6, and a shield 8 with 1 hit point overall. These are going to be the men who will charge the hordes of Oblivion with no fear. These are the general equivalent to the sort of Reichsguard knights, these sort of undeniable. If the imperial citizen wonders why he cannot afford bread this month, it is because his tax money went to funding these guys, and these guys are absolutely insane. The abilities at a glance page is currently in just sort of a revamp in terms of rewriting it, but you can expect the excellent morale, excellent stamina, immense charge potential from the Knights of the Imperial Dragon in comparison to their successive or to their precursor cavalry units. They will be a absolute titan on the field, and seeing them will be like seeing Gandalf charge the Uruks at Helm's Deep. It will be a mighty sweep of shining cavalry that will turn back the
We'll turn back the tide. I do believe he cut out there for a moment. Sebastian, are you still with me?
Yes, sorry about that. I just said the tide of battle.
Excellent. The reason that the abilities at a glance are not completed for the Knights of the Imperial Dragon is actually not because I forgot to write them in, but because I'm still debating on what actually to give them. I am debating whether or not to make these guys even more powerful by giving them anti-cav. I doubt it. Many of you who heard earlier were sort of basing the early roster around Gondor. Gondor's only premier cavalry unit, the Gondor Cavalry, have skilled against mounts as a thing. They are literally melee cav meant to go kill other cavalry. I'm debating giving that to the Knights of the Imperial Dragon, but I do think they're fine. I don't think they need a buff. Do you think so, Sebastian?
I couldn't see why. I
uh,
can't say that I think that and also, yes, I apologize. Just to clarify, the end game set of armor in Oblivion, as I'm looking at it right now, I believe is called the Imperial Dragon armor, and that is our inspiration for that.
Yes, indeed. Speaking of inspiration, Sebastian, I'd like to step off document for a moment to discuss the scripts that we have for the faction. Let's go over the general philosophy we have. We'll skip past, if you notice, there's a little dotted line here at the bottom of the roster. We'll skip to the end of the roster and simply look at the scripts here. I will read over the Lord of Shining Hosts. This is our answer to the Imperial roster being very much one note, as we've emphasized here, I think, a couple dozen times at this point. So, the Lord of Shining Hosts. A large part of Imperial history is the conquest of all of Tamriel minus the provinces of Morrowind and Blackmarsh. Under Tiber Septim, the forces of Tamriel were united under one banner and served one emperor. This script aims to reflect that idea upon the Imperial roster. Much of the Empire's military is solely focused on the Imperial Legion and thus lacks diversity in many key areas. This was, as stated earlier, designed with the purpose of the Empire expanding to control all of Tamriel. Being allied to or conquerors of certain factions will grant the Empire access to units that will shore up the holes in their roster and allow them to expand more easily, although these units will not come quickly by any means. Most ancillary Imperial units will be region locked to settlements within the original borders of their factions. For example, Crowns and Forebears units will only be recruitable in Hammerfell regions, and certain factions, such as the Khajiit and Valen Wood Elves, will not have any units that are able to be recruited. Some factions will not have to be conquered in order to recruit their troops. Factions like Skyrim, Great House Hlalu, and the Clan of Forebears simply need to be allied to the Empire for their men to be acquired. All units will be available at the appropriate buildings within their recruitment zones. This will be an attempt to keep some semblance of the old system from the original mod that allowed players to produce countless special units through the Fighters Guild once they had conquered certain settlements, although at a greatly reduced ability. So the general idea for this whole thing, as is referenced in the last paragraph there, the Fighters Guild in the original game is broken. I've said it many times and I will say it again. Being able to acquire the Dawn Guard, the Skull units, the undead units from Mana Marco, the Men of Rimmon, all of that being under the Pirates of Stros Mackay, able to acquire all of that under the Fighters Guild is a horrible decision as far as balance and as far as faction theming. To let you guys understand just how egregious it can be, my very first game ever of the Elder Scrolls Total War as the Stormcloaks, because I wanted to play as Ulfric Stormcloak. I conquered Imperial City with Ulfric and a stack of Dawn Guard. And I conquered more than half my territories using the undead units that are literally unable to be broken, and using the Skull that are some of the best, mid-tier units the game has to offer. There is no reason for you to use your faction's troops. There is no incentive for you to focus on your faction's weak points and overcoming them. You can just pick up several different literal rosters of units and go at it. The Empire is going to maintain some of this idea, specifically because they are the Empire of Tamriel, and the political situation around the Empire is one of the most important points of the lore. So, for example, you will be able to get access to Light Javcav from Hammerfell. You'll be able to get special armor-piercing light infantry from Skyrim. You'll be able to get access to different units from Daggerfall and Wayrest. The idea here is that you will, again, be able to shore up the key weak points of your army with a couple of specialist units that are on loan to you from other factions. And that's the idea we've discussed there, isn't it, Sebastian?
Yes, we wanted to keep that idea of there comes a point in which conquering the map just kind of becomes conquering the map, and you're going through the motions. And in the spirit of later games, potentially kind of like Total War Warhammer, though not to that extent, within the Medieval 2 system, we wanted events and scripts to trigger that would continue to encourage a sort of exploration and a sort of fun within the world, and kind of discovering the things that come with a progressive campaign.
Indeed. And so the Lord of Shining Hosts will encourage you to play the faction in a lore accurate manner. You can just straight up conquer certain factions and still get their units, but they will be region recruitment locked to certain areas. And now on to the actual pivotal part of the beta that we'll be launching, and our general philosophy here. There is a lot more in our heads than what is written on this paper, but I will simply ask Sebastian for now to read over what we have written for the Skyrim Civil War.
The most central focus of the 5th Elder Scrolls title is the civil war between the Kingdom of Skyrim, the Empire of Cyrodiil, and the Stormcloak rebels loyal to Ulfric, the Bear of Markarth, no matter what Alduin would have to say about the matter. As such, the Empire's focus will be on helping Skyrim to win the war and wipe out the insurgents threatening the security of the Empire's northern border. Victory for the Empire means victory for Skyrim. In return, the Kingdom of Skyrim will grant the Empire access to more of their lower-tier units through the Lord of Shining Host script, and a weapon upgrade bonus at the top tier of the Empire's blacksmithing line, as the Nords grant the Empire their superior skills in craftsmanship. However, upon the conclusion of the Skyrim Civil War with a victory for the Kingdom of Skyrim, and by extension the Empire, the Aldmeri Dominion will form automatically and declare war on both Skyrim and the Empire. Several stacks will land on the shores of both factions and will attack specific settlements immediately. These attacks are not meant to pose an insane challenge to the whole faction, but will catch the unsuspecting player completely off guard. Defeat for the Kingdom of Skyrim means the crowning of Ulfric Stormcloak as High King, and the civil war turning into a fully fledged crisis between monarchs. Titus Mede II will have to contend with the Stormcloaks as they are rallied by Ulfric's victory, and prepare for all-out war with a resurgent nation bent on conquest.
So the idea for the Skyrim Civil War is very much, and this script, by the way, will be fully fledged out for the actual beta. The technically all other nations will be locked in the files. They'll simply be slotted behind that non-playable tag in the Desker strat file. But you can unlock the other factions. But the idea for the Empire is you want the Skyrim Civil War to end on your terms so that you can immediately turn and take the fight to the Aldmeri Dominion. On that note, something is mentioned in that third paragraph about the Aldmeri Dominion forming automatically. Sebastian, would you like to tell people about our plans for the Somerset Isles faction and why that little line is necessary in the description?
Yes, well, in keeping with the themes of lore accurate, immersive flavor, politics, and character choice, the kingdom of the Somerset Isles, as it were, the High Elf faction, will actually start not as the Aldmeri Dominion yet. There is going to be a sort of, at least for the players who happen to choose the Somerset Isles faction, there will be the political choices of going down the more totalitarian Aldmeri Dominion route or the more Kingdom of Aldmeris kind of route that we see in ESO. And in winning the front for the Empire, the general assumption would be that the humans regain their lost power, the Thalmor faction are able to propagandize and continue their inquisitions more effectively, and thusly they would gain total control over Aldmeris through their worries of human resurgence. And so and also in keeping with the lore of Skyrim, that the Civil War existed primarily as a way for the Thalmor to pacify the Empire and the Nord regions. The conclusion of such a war would naturally bring the Thalmor to the human doorstep and reignite the sort of Great War.
Yeah, I will come out and say it. Sebastian and Mai's interpretation of Titus Mede II's war against the Aldbury Dominion is that he didn't lose, he simply failed to win. And so Titus Mede's idea here was actually political genius, in my opinion. Forgive us for coping and seething over an imperial loss to the damned elves. But the idea here is that Titus Mede II was simply holding on and simply biding his time until the Imperial Legion could become strong enough to fight back against the Aldmeri Dominion itself. As for the actual focus of the Aldmeri Dominion, the formation of the faction is going to be the complete absorption of Valenwood, Palatine, and Anakina. All three factions that would fall under the normal auspices of the Altmeri Dominion are automatically going to be absorbed into the faction. So as the Empire, you cannot simply end the Skyrim Civil War, because that may in turn end you, as the Aldmeri Dominion becomes the single largest faction in all of Tamriel, because they now have over 40 settlements and all of the armies that belonged to those individual factions. Ending the Skyrim Civil War will kick off another Dominion. And that's one thing I want to touch on in particular. The game will feature multiple campaigns. We're not just focusing on 4th Era. We are also going to do 3rd Era and the Oblivion Crisis as their own separate campaigns. But for the 3rd Era, there is the incentive to play as the Aldmeri Dominion as simply the Kingdom of Somerset. The Aldmeri Dominion has formed multiple times throughout Tamriel's history. I do believe the one that formed to crush the Empire in the time of Elder Scrolls V is the 4th Aldmeri Dominion. But the point is, the Dominion is going to start as a formable nation, a la the Reunited Kingdom for Divide and Conquer. And you are going to be able to, as the player of the Aldmeri Dominion, of the Kingdom of Somerset, form that Dominion. Or if you are the Empire or Skyrim or the Stormcloaks, you are going to be able to watch that be formed and silently curse yourself as you just spiked the difficulty something fierce. But that is the general idea for the scripts here. But I would like Sebastian to give us an alternate history route. What if Titus Mede II signed the White Gold Concordat, but then used his political acumen and a little bit of shrewd politicking to completely absolve himself of responsibility?
Well, for those of you who are fans of the Oblivion style medieval aesthetic, as said before, that general medieval fantasy roster for Cyrodiil, we have implemented a new choice. It's partially inspired by the Total War Rome military reform choice, and it involves quite a good bit of politicking on behalf of the imperial players. So your politicians will come to you with a sort of a general proposition, the idea of it, lore wise, is going to be that as the empire now kind of doesn't want to pose a threat to the Aldmeri Dominion, and potentially needs to recoup their losses, there is a choice to be made in transitioning away from the adaptive power of the Legion in favor of regional troops. So Cheydinhal, Skingrad, Kvatch, all of these places are instead going to rescind their membership into the Imperial Legion, disband the Legion, and then instead each fiefdom of the imperial states is going to be responsible for training its own troops in their own relevant cultural style. So you will effectively be going from a general Roman style kind of Pax Cyrodiilica to the idea of feudalistic Cyrodiil. And the benefits from that are going to be an increased sort of flavor in troops, if you prefer that aesthetic, but then also moving away from the uniform strengths of the Imperial Legion into very strong specializations based on region. And also a reduced upkeep because it will be on the sort of baronies, counts, and lords to fund a lot of their forces being rallied more so than to come from the imperial treasury. It's going to be a very different style of play comparatively, but it's going to be one that offers potentially a lot of really interesting upsides and downsides, dependent on whether you take it as a challenge, whether you want to, or whether say this playstyle is actually a lot more fitting of how you play Med 2. There's just a whole lot more there in this sort of transition into feudal Cyrodiil as opposed to the Roman Cyrodiil units. It's a fun way of us adding a sort of lower based political choice to keep things interesting.
Yes, the actual lore implication of this will be that Titus Mede II surrenders after the Battle of the Red Ring. He sits down with the Aldmeri Dominion and signs the White Gold Concordat, banning Talos worship and saying that the Aldmeri Dominion are now the rulers of Tamriel, and essentially accepting the bribe that the High Elves give him, and then turning around to every single one of his lords that he is the emperor of and saying, "Hey, I officially abolish the Imperial Legion. Go home. Your lands are now your own. You may do what you want with them." But Titus Mede is not a fool, nor is he an idiot, and neither is the Imperial Legion that disloyal. Is that on the surface, if the Thalmor Justicars were to come up to him and say, "You're directing your legions to operate against us in ways that we don't agree with," Titus Mede could simply hold up his hands and say, "I have no direct control over the barons and lords of my land. You'll have to take it up with them." And the lords will simply operate as they see fit, while Titus Mede secretly pulls the strings behind the scenes, as we know the
Yes.
good emperor has always ever done.
It is effectively Titus Mede in Crusader King's term transitioning from a martial style monarchic playthrough to a intrigue style monarchic playthrough. He is going to be playing the long game, as it were, because if the White Gold Concordat specifically states that the emperor must be in legal compliance with the Aldmeri Dominion, he will simply reduce and rescind all legal control that the emperor has over anything. So technically, the emperor is not breaking the White Gold Concordat because the Count of Skingrad did not sign the White Gold Concordat.
And the chests of gold certainly did help, which he will send to Skyrim post haste. But all that out of the way, that is a very, very fun and very interesting excuse for us to completely revolutionize the way the Empire works. And I will mostly hand this over to Sebastian as we touch on the very first Imperial unit, the feudal Empire, the Cyrodiilic Volunteers.
Yes. So, as a brief preface and the sort of general final footnote, this is also our general answer to people saying that the Imperial Legion are one note. And the answer to that is yes. Here's the option to have Cyrodiil be as culturally diverse as all the other factions. And so we start with going from a going from the traditional fantasy Rome archetype into a medieval Italy, medieval England kind of thing that you see in Oblivion, and it's definitely a passion project of ours. This is one that really isn't something that we've taken. This is where the remastered title of our mod becomes stretched in that it's more than a remaster. We're adding content that is purely from our love of the series and the lore. And so the first first instance of that is this first new troop of this new line that we get to introduce, the Cyrodiilic Volunteers. So, with the military reforms of the Empire in full swing, the forces of the Imperial Legion have formally retired, leaving the borders of Cyrodiil undefended. However, these men, many former guards and Legion auxiliaries, have taken up arms in service to their liege lords and stand ready to fight for the honor and the glory of their people. Forming a militia of citizen soldiers, these men have stepped in to defend the homes they love. So, they will have a cost of 290 and an upkeep of 110. If you'll notice, that's a whole lot less than the Imperial Guardsmen in terms of relative scale. They'll come as 201 soldiers per unit with an attack stat of 6, a charge bonus of 3, and they will be a sword and board guard unit, I believe. They will have a total defense of 9 with 4 points from armor, 2 points to their defense skill, 3 points to shield, and 1 hit point. And you think, well, I've just traded in the Imperial Guardsmen for these units, and what do I get for that? And the answer is more potential expansion between fiefs for economic buildings, potentially playing tall, or unit diversity.
Sort of the idea for Cyrodiilic Volunteers, as Sebastian said before, the idea here is that these units are slightly less in quality. Those of you that remember the actual guardsmen up above, they are a stat of 710. So the stat line is actually not that much of a neutering, and that's something Sebastian and I touched on, is that we don't want to immediately slap you with trash. You're still the Empire. Like these people, as we spoke about earlier with the inspiration of Rome, these are still citizen soldiers. But the upkeep is less than half. We're talking the upkeep for these units is very, very little, because these citizen soldiers really do equip themselves and feed themselves like the ancient legions did in the early years of Rome, when Romulus and Remus were shortly after they butchered each other. But the idea here is that the Cyrodiilic Volunteers are this sort of militia unit that you can call on. They're still going to hold up very well, and their cost is much reduced, giving you an early economic boost to your entire faction. So I will handle the next unit, the Cyrodiilic Sentries. Also, you'll notice that the Cyrodiilic Volunteers don't have abilities at a glance. Yes, they are militia. They do not have any sort of boosts to morale or stamina or special ability, because you are taking everybody that walks in that door, because they're volunteers. So, Cyrodiilic Sentries, as we have pass on, there are still very much the sword and shield and the spear defensive units. Though not as skilled as their legion counterparts, these men are familiar with holding actions and prefer the defense to the offense. Armed with a solid shield and a goodly spear, these militia troops serve as guards, patrolmen, and general enforcers of the peace. While none of these men expect to be sent off to war, they will fight and die for the homes they protect. They have a cost of 280 and an upkeep of 110. Again, very reasonable on the upkeep spectrum. You can field a stack of these for just over 2,000 coin, which is you probably don't want a full stack of them, but that's the point, is that it's only going to be 2 grand army upkeep a turn for a full stack. Late game stacks will usually be within the 8 to 10,000 range. But you get 201 soldiers with an attack bonus of 4, a charge bonus of 2, and a total defense of 14. 1 hit point, and they do get the anti-cavalry keyword, but they are just going to be very, very good at holding against enemy cavalry, but they are not nearly as disciplined. Something you're going to have to watch as early reform Cyrodiil is routing. These early units are not going to have great morale. Morale across the board is going to be pretty boosted, along the lines of what Divide and Conquer has. But if these guys start to take heavy losses, if you don't have a general, you're going to be seeing your volunteers run as they question how much they're being paid versus the value of their lives. So now we get into something that is a little bit still very much thematic along the lines of ancient Rome with their auxiliary troops. Sebastian, please talk about the squires.
Yes. So, composed of freedmen wealthy enough to own a horse and some armor, these riders are hired by their lords to augment military forces and scout enemy positions. Better serviceable as aides to knights or mobile messengers, these horsemen nevertheless form an integral part of the defensive forces of Cyrodiil, driving back those who would threaten their lords and lands. So these are you've gone from men who would have served in the Legion who are skilled with a horse being made into scouts to men of a feudal holding in Cyrodiil who are of a noble family and can afford some armor and a horse by themselves being put into a squire unit. So the formation of these units, generally lore wise, is going to be different. And that's reflected in a cost of 340 and an upkeep of just 130 for a starting cavalry unit because these men generally had everything already that you needed. They will come in 76 riders to a unit with an attack of 4 and a charge bonus of 6. They will be a melee sword cavalry. They will have a total defense of 9 with 3 armor points, 3 points in defensive skill, and then 3 points in shield with a total hit point of 1.
These squires, as we've stated, are just going to be specifically light cavalry that is designed to do what light cavalry does. As Sebastian said, they are going to have a sword, not a light spear, as the Imperial Scouts did. They are not charge cav, they are just cavalry for the sake of cavalry, because as we all know, cavalry is king. The idea for the Cyrodiil Squires is very much in line with the idea that we had for the physical roster. We didn't just want to throw lore units into this and say, oh, we're doing it for lore. We also wanted to change up the play style. As we said, we wanted to first off abolish the Legion, but then we wanted to give Cyrodiil a very specific focus for the reform list. And Sebastian, would you like to talk about that a little bit before we get deeper into the roster?
Yes, and the next unit up on the roster is going to reflect this a lot. So in the base Imperial Legion playthrough, you have a titanic force of infantry with very solid cavalry support and some decent archers. And in the feudal Cyrodiil path, you're going to have some specialized infantry, which can be good and can be bad, dependent on where they're recruited from, and then a great variety and a great specialization of cavalry, so much more cavalry, and a great specialization of ranged units. So what was originally just the Colovian sort of Imperials with bows is going to turn in Imperials with potentially many different kinds of ranged units. One, to kind of diversify that roster and make you not feel like you're being cheated out of the Imperial units, but also because realistically, these lords and their peoples might prefer to fight with certain weapons over others, and so thusly you get units with a lot more weapon diversity.
And speaking of weapon diversity, shall we talk about one of the units that I do believe will have you voice acting in this project? As many of you know from reading the mod page, I do plan on using AI to voice several of the units in our private development Discord, which is unfortunately not open to the public at this time. I've already posted several ideas and several voice lines that I've cooked up for the different factions, but certain ones will be voiced by a real human being to keep in that touch. And Sebastian, one of his favorite units that he's already developed a full roster of voice lines for would happen to be the Nibene Marines. So, Sebastian, would you please cover that for the fine folks?
That is going to be correct. And yes, to assuage anyone's concerns about our usage of AI, we plan to use AI as the small development group that we are. We do not intend to deprive anyone of their labor. We are a very small development team and we do as much labor as we can. And the usage of AI is twofold in our project. It is one, simply to get the product to you um, on time reasonably. And two, it is because we want to deliver a very authentic Elder Scrolls experience. And the AI voices that we are using are very much in line with the voices from the Elder Scrolls games. We are not fans of rampant AI usage in the fields of paid labor when it comes to professional games and stuff like that. This is a specific thing to our mod team. And so if you can live with that and if you can be accepting of that, fear not. We also have personal voices and ideally more and more voice talent or more and more voice performances being lended to the project. And so the one of the units that I will be voicing are the Nibene Marines. These are definitely showing some of our inspiration from DAC and from other Lord of the Rings sort of media. In that the Pelargir Marines the general sort of sea-bound coastal Gondor units who fling javelins are going to be what you get in this game. So when you pick Cyrodiil, you get a variety of weapon flavors, a variety of variety of sort of design diversity. And you also get some kind of fun references. So the Nibene Marines are very close to the Pelargir Marines. Uh, and in their general philosophy, we have here, although the Imperials have long been considered a single conglomerate, these hardy soldiers are evidence of a rich history that belies that fantasy. Serving to protect the vulnerable coastal towns of Cyrodiil, the men of the Nibene enjoy a light set of scaled armor and mighty javelins that are capable of piercing even the toughest plate. Able to quickly strike down their foes and meet them sword to sword, these troops are best used in a supporting role to the main army. So these Jav units are going to be at a cost of 350 and an upkeep of 140. They will come to 151 soldiers per unit. They will have a melee attack of 6, a missile attack of the same amount of 6 points, a charge bonus of 2. They will primarily be using their javelin for missile unit, and then they'll be able to use their sword when they're out of ammo. They will have a total defense of 13, 4 points in armor, 5 points in defense skill, and 4 points in shield. And yes, as you read, their unique abilities, which is uncommon with the Imperial Legion side of Cyrodiil, will be having effect against armor in their javelins.
Yes, the whole point of the Nibene Marine is, like we said earlier with the prefects, is you have a couple of these units in for the whole battle line. Nibene Marines are meant to be where you have the Cyrodiilic volunteers and you have the Cyrodiilic guardsmen, the sword and shield and the spear and shield units. You throw some Nibene Marines in there to specifically ping out any heavily armored units that might give your boys a little bit more trouble, and then the Nibene Marines can serve as perfectly acceptable 613 infantry. After the fact, they do, as Sebastian said, specifically use swords. So they are not going to be an anti-cav unit specifically. They are just going to have a few missiles. They're only going to have 3 or 4 missiles as javelin units, because javelins are very deadly, as anybody who has played with a javelin-focused faction, such as the Iberian factions or any of the Enedwaith, as Enedwaith in DAC. All of you are familiar with just how devastating javelins are, especially when you throw armor piercing on there. So the Nibene Marines will be the support unit that really whittles the enemy down and pretty much guarantees a victory from the outset. Now, I would be honored to cover again, a large departure from the Legion in the fact that we have archers. We actually have decent tier archers. So the Colovian Bowmen. The bow is one of the most popular weapons in Tamriel, and the men of the Colovian Highlands have a long tradition of archery. Though not as deadly at range as other archers, these hardy Imperials wear strong armor and wield sharp swords, trained to support the army once their supply of arrows has run dry. A small metal buckler allows them to deflect enemy arrows, making these men better able to stand up to a volley. They cost 320, and the upkeep for these archers is 120. As anybody will tell you, archers with an upkeep of 120 is busted. That is an amazing unit, and you should be spamming these bowmen out as quickly as you can, because they have a melee attack of 5 and a total defense of 11. They are what would be considered medium archers with a 4 missile attack. 4, as those of you know from Divide and Conquer's balancing of missile stats, about 5 is the best for a standard archer, and 6 or 7 is about the ranger quality. So the standard bowman for the Imperial Feudal Legions is going to be 4, which is an excellent set of basic archers. And once again, they have good morale and good stamina and can use flaming missiles. So Colovian bowmen are going to be able to outshoot every other archer at the low tier. At least any archer that is not specialized. Valen Woods archers, for example, would be able to outshoot Colovian bowmen. But the idea was, hey, let's knock the archers for the Empire down a bit and give them access to some actually pretty decent medium archers. And once again, even though they're on the lower end, they can still serve as hybrid infantry because their stats are actually better than your Cyrodiilic volunteers. Once again, you are not the Legion. So Colovian bowmen can get stuck in there if need does arise. Now, Sebastian, who are those peasants over there in dark cloaks who think they look awesome and are just here? What are they here for again?
I'm so very glad you asked. Um, So, as we've said, those of you who are like, listen, the Legion are great, but they're a little one note. I miss Oblivion. I miss the variety of the Cyrodiilic culture. uh, I've petitioned, and boy, these guys are here. The Order of the Virtuous Blood. Now, if you'll remember, in the Oblivion questline for them, they are kind of a bunch of morons who got infiltrated by a vampire. They were vampire hunters who I don't believe successfully killed any vampires outside of the main player character,
Not a
and they were
single one.
infiltrated subsequently by a vampire. However, the idea being noblemen or general middling sort of well-off sons of people in the imperial city who did not want to join the volunteer guardsmen of the peasantry or the sort of knightly squires who would be throwing themselves into battle could join the virtuous blood. Those with a mind for the divines or keeping their city safe at night could join the order. And the idea would be sort of that this order kind of after its brief kind of blip appearance in Oblivion would kind of get a slight resurgence in Skyrim as a sort of way of getting that sort of upper middle crust of imperial society to join the war effort. So composed of those dedicated to wiping out the menace of the undead in the Empire, the Order calls on citizens of Cyrodiil to prepare for the inevitable return of the King of Worms, flushing out the thralls of vampires wherever they may dwell. These crossbowmen are adept at piercing even the toughest armor. The men of the Order have taken advantage of the recent restructuring to form combat ready battalions to serve at the behest of their lord and provide much needed stopping power to the regiments of the Emperor. So, yeah, the Emperor has kind of deemed, well, I'm not in control of the military anymore, and the chantry of the divines is when, you know what? Those guys who claim to be vampire hunters, they might not have done a good job, but maybe we could spice them up a little bit. So, with funding from the latent imperial reserves and the religion of the divines, men who are particularly religiously devoted or just want to be cool vampire hunters and think of themselves and such can put on a cloak and pick up a crossbow. Yes, this is the one imperial unit with a crossbow because the the divines can, I mean, the Church of the Divines can afford a mass production of crossbows. Crossbows don't require that guys know how to use archery as much to use them. You can kind of, the difficulty would be reloading, but these are basically your peasant militia crossbowmen from Venice and the Italian city states in Med 2. They will come at a cost of 340 with an upkeep of 130, so I think that's just under half, or a bit under half. They will be 151 units per 151 soldiers per unit. They'll have an attack of 5, obviously, a missile attack of 10 with a charge bonus of 2. Their weapon type primarily will be missile from their crossbow. They will have total defense of 6 with an armor of 3. You know, I mean, kind of padded clothing and a cloak. Defense skill of 3 and a shield of 0. Their abilities at a glance are good morale and good stamina. So these are men who believe they are on a kind of holy mission, and they will take a tiny bit more to break than most. But maybe their confidence is placed in the fact they are holding a crossbow. This is an incredibly powerful. They're like, well, we are sent by Akatosh and the divines to cleanse the realm. Maybe it's because you have a giant stake flinging weapon that is shooting stakes into the hearts of people. Maybe they're not hunting. And I think the general joke about the Order of the Virtuous Blood is they're actually not really going to be hunting undead that much. The undead don't really have armor, and you're really not going to encounter many undead units in the course of the campaign. So, much like the real Virtuous Blood, they might not be slaughtering that many vampires at all. They're kind of just guys with crossbows, really.
the
And that's
the idea
their
is that regiments of the Order of the Virtuous Blood will show up to battle. The Nordic allies of the Empire who have shown up to fight for the honor of their Nedic brothers. They arrive on the field of battle. They have their swords. They've got their shields, and they look over to the front lines of the recently revamped Imperial Legion, and they see these guys in dark cloaks. Who invited the cosplayers?
Yeah, these are if you like witch hunters from Warhammer or Victor Saltzpyre from Vermintide, these are the kind of guys that are trying to do such a thing. I had an art iPad that I was drawing on, and I fully fully considered just making them wear like noble clothes from the Imperial City. Just have
It's
crossbows. They're just the guys who picked up daddy's money to join the Imperial forces and then get a crossbow put in their hands. But some of them, I think, the more well-rounded approaches, some of them are people, maybe even peasantry, who are genuinely pious people and want
Mhm.
to support the war effort.
And no, you don't understand. I'm going to survive this battle because the entire chapel prayed over me for 2 minutes and laid their hands on me and gave me the good wishes of the divines. Akatosh be praised.
Yeah, so you'd be taking, and there is a sense of pride in the feudal Cyrodiilic player in investing in all the upgrades to blacksmithing and stuff to take these prissy daddy's boy recruits with crossbows to turn them into something kind of approximating witch hunters and that sort of aesthetic, because with enough kind of armor upgrades and enough tactics and maybe enough experience to each unit, you can make them a sincerely fearsome crossbow unit, and maybe you can finally realize their dream of fighting undead on a battlefield.
Absolutely. The idea of upgrading this arm, because again, their stats are supposed to be pitiful. They're 5'6", with a, and the only thing that makes them good, like Sebastian said, they're peasant crossbowmen. That's literally the inspiration and the purpose of them is to die if they get hit by anything. But again, giving them 3 or 4 points in the armor upgrade suddenly takes their defense up to a 10 or 11, meaning that they are going to be able to take missile fire and light cavalry charges, which is just Oh, I don't want to know. I don't. I've fought Milan too many times. I don't want to remember. But I love Milan. Milan's one of my favorite factions in Base Med too. I don't want to remember losing a stack of heavy knights against a bunch of crossbowmen. We need to move on.
Oh god, yeah, I'm realizing as I'm going down the roster, these are all just going to be the units that I'm going to start throwing out voices for, because these are all the special units. And my first, I'm so glad that the next one up is this unit.
Yes, I again, like I said earlier, I took over the Imperial Legion mostly because that was it's the standard Empire thing, and Sebastian and I have both worked on this. This entire secondary roster is our brainchild from our love of the lore, but Sebastian has this is mostly these are most this is his side of the Empire. So please explain to them these knights question mark of the stag.
So, as the roster goes on, we will get to see some pretty interesting, genuinely compelling knights from the lore. However, not all fiefdoms are created equal, and they certainly don't make the same amount of tax money. Uh, so, our first knight's up, and this is a slight, very slight reference to House Baratheon from A Song of Ice and Fire. However, the city they come from does, in fact, have a stag on it. This is not out of the ordinary, but the Knights of the Stag. More akin to professional highwaymen than real knights, these soldiers fight for coin, not crown. Armed with wicked blades and prepared to strike where the foe is weakest, the Hedge Knights of Breville hold no qualms about attacking from behind or ambushing their enemies in the forests. To them, victory and plunder outstrip honor and glory, eschewing the eland of their counterparts for the safety of the shadows. So, again, not every fiefdom is created the same, and not every holding has a lot of influence or particular ideas about honor. So some of these knights are just kind of hungry people who were better than other Breville residents at robbing people. And the count was like, you know what? We don't even have knightly orders. Do you guys just kind of want to be made into knights? As he was getting his carriage robbed. And they were like, yeah, you know what? Why not? So,
Congratulations, you are being rescued. Please do not
yeah,
resist.
the count, the count was robbed by some highwaymen. He proceeded to get out of the carriage, put a pin on them, and go, "You're in the military now."
You're in the guard, son.
So these Knights of the Stag, these ambush marauders, are going to have a cost of 440 and an upkeep of 170. They will be 201 highwaymen to each unit. Again, real knights don't come in that many numbers. These are totally not just some robbers he recruited
Yeah,
off of the
don't
side of the street.
look. They have the stag symbol stitched into their leather shoulder pads, and look, they're using two swords, which means they must be some of the
I should,
highest quality
yes,
troops.
I should note that I did a mock-up drawing of what their troop progression would look like, and so the final the final idea of them is a male with a white surcoat with the stag on it and some antlers on the helm. Their original design, however, is in fact a shirt with a stag badly painted on it. Uh, and so these units will have an attack of 13, a charge bonus of 3. They will be a melee weapon type. I believe a single sword,
uh,
single hand sword.
Dual
Uh,
swords for these
oh, a
guys.
dual sword unit. That's perfect. A total defense of 6, an armor of 1, a defense skill of 5, hence the 2 swords, a shield of 0. They will have decent stamina from robbing everyone, and they can hide anywhere. Now, that is where their unit variety and the diversity of the Cyrodiilic Empire's military, from high class to low class, really comes into play.
Yes, the Knights of the Stag are your classic high attack ambush infantry. For those of you that understand where the Medieval 2's morale system works, is that several things can cause morale shocks. The loss of a general, the retreat of a general, being flanked by another unit, sudden heavy casualties, and the arrival or appearance of a unit that they did not see before out of cover. Ambush infantry is not overly effective against most professional armies, but a unit of Knights of the Stag suddenly popping up on the enemy's flank and charging into their back is going to hurt, especially with that 13 attack, is they are meant to get in there and start cutting people down. However, as Sebastian astutely pointed out, one armor, these guys are going to die to anything. Cavalry charges, an infantry counter charge, arrows to the back. They are highwaymen. They are literal robbers with dual swords who are much better at killing than they are at not dying. So these are ambush infantry for ambush infantry's sake. Again, they can hide anywhere. It's very effective. They are great at defending lines of archers, but they are not going to stand up in a head-on fight unless they heavily outclass their opponents, which is the entire point. They are very cheap for what they do. 13 attack on a one-handed weapon, which again, for those of you that understand Med2's game engine, is that the idea here is that they are going to absolutely wipe lighter units with the speed of their attacks. So that is the point of the Knights of the Stag, is they are just a light trooper. So moving on,
Moving
to the
on.
next
Yeah.
unit, I will go into the Knights of the Eagle, as
Go right ahead.
these are basically Nords that are still loyal to the Empire. So, descended from Nords who are intermarried with the inhabitants of Bruma, the warriors that bear the crest of the Eagle charge into battle wielding massive two-handed weapons. Crushing their foes with the might of their arms, the Guardians of the Border hold to their purpose despite all odds. Mixing Nordic courage with Imperial honor, these sons of Shore are more than a match for their northern brethren. These guys are the first unit that's going to have a relatively increased cost. The cost is 460 for a unit of 201 of them, and the upkeep is 180. That's still very, very cheap. That is, in fact, less than 50%. We tried to keep things around 40% upkeep for the Cyrodiilic feudal empire, because the Imperial Legion often caps at 50 and sometimes goes higher than 50% for the low tier unit. So we really wanted to stick 40% or below for upkeep for the Cyrodiilic feudal system. These men are just a straight up armor piercing two-handed infantry with 10 attack, a charge of 4, and a defense of 12, 8 of which is dedicated to armor with good morale and good stamina. These are just two-handed heavy infantry. They are your hammer to the anvil. Again, your army is relatively non-professional, and so these Nords, literally people of mostly Nordic blood, are going to stay by their cultural roots and just provide you with a very decent mid-tier armor-piercing infantry that is just going to hold up well in combat. These guys could technically be infantry of the line, even though they're two-handed. They are two-handed armor-piercing, and that 8 armor with the defensive skill of 4 is just going to allow them to hold against most other light infantry very, very well. These are the first of what I would consider medium infantry for the Cyrodiilic reformed empire.
Yep. I mean, that is exactly right. We hear a lot in the Skyrim game about how many Nords join the Legion and contribute to the bulk of the Legion. Orcs and Nords make up the biggest sort of strong frontline fighters, and if the Legion is disbanded, the Nords are not giving up on their combat prowess, and the Counts are certainly not going to let them do so. So they will find, decorated Nord warriors and go, hey, listen, we're going to strap you up in some plate, get you a better weapon that maybe you like more, two-handed, and let you keep fighting.
Indeed, keep fighting for coin. So now, my friend, would you like to cover the Knights of the Mermaid, which are again, these are, if I am remembering correctly, these are Knights of the Mermaid or yes, they're Javelin Cavalry. That is correct.
Yes.
Oh wait, no,
Um,
they're not Javelin Cavalry. These are yes, my apologies. Again, this roster is very, very diverse. Knights of the Mermaid. Knights of the Mermaid are heavy infantry with javelins. These are your equivalency of dismounted mailed knights. We have talked about this. A lot of projects, mods for Medieval 2, will include a dismounted mailed knight in addition to the dismounted feudal knight as an earlier tier sort of medium to heavy infantry. Sebastian and I created the Knights of the Mermaid. We decided to reimagine them as a medium knight infantry that is able to throw a couple of javelins that are higher in attack but lack armor piercing. So Sebastian, please go ahead.
yes. So, hailing from the beautiful coastal city of Anvil, these mariners favor light and fast fighting to heavy combat. Armed with stout arms and sharp javelins, these troops disrupt enemy formations with a solid strike, then close to deliver the killing blow. Long the soul barrier. Oh, yeah. Long the soul barrier between the sea and slaughter, the Knights of the Mermaid stand ready to cast their foes off the depths of oblivion. This is we make the joke that the Knights of the Stag are highwaymen that got badges put on them, but the Knights of the Mermaid and the Nibelheim Marines are also just kind of pirates. They were totally not pirates who were throwing javelins that that were given armor and position in the military. Pirates, fishermen, corsairs. If you think of the big ship quest that you have in Oblivion with those guys on the dock, these are the kind of guys that get recruited if they want to join. And so they'll be at a cost of 520, which is more obviously than the Nibelheim Marines, an upkeep of 210, which is very decent. They'll come in 201 per unit with a melee attack of 8 and a missile attack of 10, charge bonus of 2. They will primarily use their javelins and then be used to close in with the melee combat. They'll have a total defense of 15, so 4 armor, 6 defense, and then 4 shield. And if I check the Nibelheim Marines, I don't believe the Nibelheim Marines had a shield, which is an upgrade.
Nibelheim
Uh,
Marines did have a shield, but the Knights of the Mermaid lack in a specifically key area that the Nibelheim Marines did indeed fill.
you're absolutely right. Yes, yes. So both of them do have shields, and both of them have shields that are 4, but the Knights of the Mermaid have got just a bit more bulk to them, and as the uh, foot-based javelin faction. And so and as a natural upgrade, they're going to have better morale and better stamina, which is at the good tier.
And yes, so Knights of the Mermaid again are just the idea of, hey, here's medium infantry. They can throw some high damage javelins in before they attack. Again, kind of inspired by the Enidwaith idea of your medium infantry should do more than just be medium infantry. And again, with the coastal idea of Anvil, again, we're trying to include as much lore as we can. Before the project truly got started in the development phase we're in now, we had a very, very kind expert on lore who has unfortunately had to move to other projects, spell out literally, I think, over 24 different unit types that we could use from every scrap of lore that the Elder Scrolls had for the Empire. And so we took knights from each individual city, and Anvil had to have one. So we decided to make it, again, medium knights on foot that have just good javelins. So now we come to the Knights of the Wolf. So these are very much in keeping with the idea of standard knights, and I will handle these guys. True knights in shining armor, the guardians of Kvatch, professional soldiers of which the ancient stories are written. Wielding sharp swords and steel armor, the wolves march into battle bolstered by the cheers of their families and the faith of their people. Well acquainted with both war and peace, these knights will stand up to any challenge and defeat it. Their cost is 580 with an upkeep of 230. So again, as you saw with the Knights of the Mermaid up there, we're getting a little higher in cost. These are going to be pricier. There are only 151 of these men, but it is indeed worth it as they have an attack of 11, a charge of 5, and a defense of 17. This is a sword and board unit, very much online with the on par with the sword and buckler men that you get in the late game Iberian campaigns. These are just good heavy infantry, sword and shield. Their armor is 8, defense skill of 5, shield 4, with very good morale and very good stamina. Late game, and again, a lot of these guys are region recruitment locked, so you're going to not be able to recruit these all across the Cyrodiilic feudal empire, but you are going to be able to recruit a lot of these in the areas around Kvatch, and in that area you're going to have a very, very solid infantry line, especially when defending cities and defending certain areas. It is just going to be very, very easy for you to hold and push against the enemy because you have access to the Knights of the Wolf. Again, just a very, very solid general infantry unit of sword and board that is reminiscent more of the idea with the Imperial Legion. To touch on the aesthetics of the Knights of the Wolf, they're going to be black armored with the red wolf's head, if I recall correctly, Sebastian. That's what we discussed earlier, is that the Knights of the Wolf are going to be black.
Are they going to be black and red? Okay, I because for me, I thought the Knights of the Wolf were going to be with
Were
the
they?
Kvatch colors of white and gray, and I think
Yes, my apologies.
the black and red come later with one of my favorite little city states.
Yes, again, there's so much to keep track of, and we haven't even touched on the aesthetics yet, but we do have plans for each of these individual units to have colors that match the heraldry of their city of choice. And on that note, we should move to the next one, the Knights of the Azure. So, if you wouldn't mind touching on the Knights from Coral, Sebastian.
Yes. Elected to knightly service by the Earl of Coral himself, Knights of the Azure strike a mighty presence on the field of battle. Armed with distinctive blued armor and a powerful greatsword, these men, sworn to chivalric duty, make for costly but well respected warriors. Known originally for hunting bandits and keeping the peace, these great knights will teach the enemy a lesson that the brigands of Coral know very well: fear the charge. Their cost is going to be 840, and they will have an upkeep of 330, which is very generous for a heavily armored greatsword unit. They're going to come at 151 soldiers per unit with an attack of 16, charge bonus of 6, and they will be using their two-handed greatsword for melee. They will have a total defense of 16, so that is 10 points in armor and 6 points in defense with 0 shield. They are going to have very good morale and very good stamina.
The point of the Knights of the Azure is to give a sort of swordmaster unit. There are inevitably people in a fantasy setting who train with the bow, train with a sword and shield, train with a battle axe. These guys are the ones who train with a great sword. The Knights of the Azure are just very, very solid shock troops. They lack the armor piercing, as armor piercing is not something I want to give out too frequently. I know some projects give a lot of, almost all their two-handed units armor piercing. We wanted to specifically avoid that, so for the Knights of the Azure, they just have the 16 attack and 6 charge. The Knights of the Azure, again, being just a very solid hammer infantry unit. Now, we touch on the Knights of the White Stallion. This is the very first of what we alluded to earlier, where we talk about a faction that is focused more heavily on cavalry. So Sebastian, I'll let you take up the charge, as it were, on the mounted units in Cyrodiil's reformed empire.
Yes. Armed with all the heraldry and panoply of war, the Knights of the White Stallion ride into battle with arms and armor suited to running down their foes. Barded horses and armored men with fitted shields make them a tough enemy to oppose, while small lances allow them to remain mobile as well as a hazard for a head-on charge. Though lacking the elan of high, though lacking the elan of higher knightly orders of Cyrodiil, the best of Leowin protect the Valley of Nibene with a stout heart and an unwavering courage. Their cost will be 710 with an upkeep of 355. Their soldiers will come at 76 riders to a unit with an attack of 10 and a charge bonus of 9. Their weapon type will be melee, so they will have that small lance, as said before. They will have a total defense of 16 with 8 points to armor, 5 points to defense skill, and 3 points to shield. Their abilities at a glance are forming a wedge, as higher tier cavalry can do, with excellent stamina and then very good morale.
The idea for the Knights of the White Stallion is to really give the Empire access to essentially mailed knights. Mailed knights are almost exactly this profile in the original Med 2, and early game, having 3 or 4 units of mailed knights in your army basically guarantees victory against any force that you're going to meet in the field. So Knights of the White Stallion just very much fill that niche of like, hey, you need good cavalry. The Knights of the White Stallion are where you get your start. Now we move on to the Knights of the Larch. And again,
Ah,
Sebastian,
yes.
would you please?
Yes, yes. Um, Equipped with plates of dark steel and mounting darker steeds, the Knights of Larich may strike fear more than inspire joy, but they hold to their purpose regardless of their public image. Armed with some of the heaviest armor in the Empire, some of which is rumored to be ebony in make, the Knights of Skingrad keep a keen eye on the borders of Hammerfell, charging from the borders of Western Forest to terrible effect. So, if you know the Knights, if you know the lore for Skingrad and like Count Larich and his sort of bloodline and his sort of moves, we I definitely wanted to explore that and kind of investigate that. I really enjoy that sort of aesthetic and making these knights kind of thinking of them as an old forgotten order of this kind of bloodline who took arms up once again now that the legion is disbanded to sort of strike out, because the Knights of the Black Crown was like another name of theirs because of the lore surrounding the Larich family. They're just one of those really cool sworn sword kind of noble cavalry units, which is great. And the black red aesthetic is always great to see. It's a very dark aesthetic comparatively to the rest of Cyrodiil, I think, and it provides this really interesting contrast. Um, as a reflection of their high quality, their cost is going to be 900 and their upkeep will be 450. They will have 76 riders to a unit with 7 attack and 8 charge bonus. Their weapon type will be melee. I believe that's uh, melee sword and shield cavalry,
It
heavy
is
cavalry.
it is indeed sword and shield heavy cavalry rather than lanced heavy cavalry.
All right, wonderful. And then uh, they've got 26 total defense with 15 in that black armor we were talking about, 7 points to their defense skill, and then 4 to the shield. They've got excellent morale and excellent stamina on both fronts and can form a wedge.
Knights of the Larich are anti-cavalry without being anti-cavalry as far as the entire stat line is concerned. Nothing is going to beat cavalry-wise a 726 unit. What the general philosophy we had, because we had multiple cavalry units that we were going for, is we want a good base cavalry unit with the previous knights. Then we wanted Knights of the Larich to be the heavily armored light cavalry unit that you get access to. The medium knights, we really wanted to go heavy into a just pure armor stat knight, because that is what makes them more able to stand up to archery fire and in combat in general. Like I alluded to earlier with the idea of Gondor cavalry being able to hold their own in melee against other cav, Knights of the Larich are specifically designed to kill other knights, which is going to be very, very nice when you actually get a hold of them, because again, a 7-8 charge with 26 defense is nothing to sneeze at. So now we move on to the Knights of the Thorn. So I will cover these ones, as these are the answer to the Knights of the Larich, in that you don't really have a good charge cav yet. Mostly used to run down roving bands of goblins, the soldiers of Cheydinal are fast and powerful, running down their foes with brutal efficiency. Armed with steel weapons and powerful steeds, the heraldry of the order is emblazoned on every shield they bear, their pride and strength evident to all. With a smash charge and a vengeful shout, the sleepy town in the east can rest easy knowing their finest ride to safeguard their peaceful lives. They come at a cost of 800 for 76 soldiers with an upkeep of 400. It is directly down the middle because these are professional knights. They have an attack of 13 and a charge of 11. Their weapon type is a lance, a heavy cavalry lance, and then they switch to a sword and shield. They have a total defense of 19, so 9 of it is in armor. They have slightly less defense skill, but a slightly better shield than the Knights of the Larich above. Again, these are... we're trying a sort of idea here with Knights of the Larich and Knights of the Thorn with a hammer and anvil tactic, with both the hammer and the anvil being cavalry. Not that you should charge the Larich in and use them as a anvil for the hammer, but if you have a Knights of the Thorn unit and a Knights of Larich unit, you can send the Larich unit unit into the enemy cavalry, use the Knights of the Thorn to wheel about, and just slaughter the enemy cav unit in a single charge. They together just completely decimate even the heaviest cavalry, because the Knights of the Thorn charge, that 13-11 charge, will just destroy light infantry and any cavalry they run across. So again, used together, they can be devastating in their effect, which is, again, not something that the Legion has access to, is advanced cavalry tactics. And then we bring up our favorite boys, the Knights of the Imperial Dragon. There's a unit so nice we used it twice. We decided to give both ends of the roster the Knights of the Imperial Dragon, because let's face it, no matter how much the Legion changes, the Knights of the Imperial Dragon aren't going anywhere. So no matter what, the consistency you have here is that the Knights of the Imperial Dragon are very much available to you. However, just internal balance-wise, the Knights of the Thorn are 800. The Knights of the Larich are 900. The Knights of the Imperial Dragon are still 1800 with a 900 upkeep. The Knights of the Imperial Dragon are going to be expensive, but they are going to be faction-wide. So again, we've had region recruitment on a lot of these Knights before, a lot of these different units. Knights of the Imperial Dragon are going to be faction-wide recruitable in exchange for their cost being double of your best unit you would otherwise have. And that really covers everything we have for the actual faction rosters. So the last thing we're going to do real quick is go over the building line. We're not going to take nearly as much time with this. The building lines for a game like this are relatively straightforward, but we are going to touch on very specific things for the specific faction buildings. So I will simply take this over here. With the wooden walls and the different walls we have for settlements, the difference between castles and cities, we decided to give each level of city just by itself a small income bonus. For those of you that are thinking, why are they giving an income bonus to walls? Don't worry, the economy is going to be severely reworked. It's not going to be as broken as Med 2 or even TESTW, where it's just super easy to bring up a bunch of all this different stuff. It is going to be just the ability to have access to better resources through different means. Rather than your economy being broken, your economy is going to be well balanced between all of your buildings, and is sort of a reward for getting the higher tiers of walls. So when you get to the level of a town with a wooden wall, you get extra 25 upkeep per turn, income per turn, and you get a free slot of unit upkeep. I've always thought it's very strange that only certain buildings offer free upkeep when really a city should be able to maintain itself. In addition, because it's the Empire and there's very much a focus on citizen soldiery, when you hit the stone wall, which is the city level, you get 50 income, 2 units of free upkeep slots, and you can recruit a unit of Imperial Guardsmen and Sergeants or a unit of Volunteers and Sentries, and you get a bonus recruitment slot. And then finally, as sort of a final reward for getting to the large city tier, you get 100 plus income from just the wall alone. You get 3 slots of free upkeep units while within the city, 2 units of guardsmen and 2 units of sergeants tacked on to whatever you already have, and then same thing, 2 units of volunteers or sentries, and then a bonus 2 recruitment slots. Something that will become painfully evident as we go along in this building roster is that we wanted the player to have the ability to get beyond those initial 3 recruitment slots, because Sebastian, as I have said over and over again, that is the true limiter of expansion in all of these games, is that you only have 3 recruitment slots, and it's what really stops the AI from being able to turn things around when they can only really recruit 3 units per turn.
Oh, yeah.
So, same thing with the castles. We discussed this quite a bit. We decided to make castles a bit stronger in the early tier, simply because castle walls are going to allow for more military-focused expansion. So the standard wooden fort is going to give a unit of free upkeep. The keep, which is the second tier of castle, is going to give 2 units of free upkeep and an extra recruitment slot, as well as those units there that you see listed. And then the stronghold is going to give 3 units of upkeep, 2 recruitment slots, and then 2 of your basic infantry. Again, we will balance them for the faction, but the getting something to a stronghold, which is the final tier of castle, is going to be easier than getting a city fully upgraded, just because a city is going to require vastly more people to do so. So castles have a point in the actual game balance, to the point where they are better for recruiting and stashing men, because the walls themselves grant more of that ability earlier on. Now, we are just going to very quickly go through the barracks, because otherwise we'll be here all day, but the idea is for Legion Cyrodiil, The actual barracks are going to provide a goodly number of your units. And as you upgrade those buildings, as you can see in the bolded text here, those are the names of the buildings, you're going to get experience points onto your earlier units, as well as access to some higher tier units. And the specialty of the barracks in the Cyrodiil Reformed Kingdom is going to be your knightly order units that you specifically get as region recruitment. So you'll notice as we get higher up in the tiers, all the way up to the militia barracks for the Empire, you're going to see you can recruit a bunch of Imperial Guardsmen, Sergeants, and Pikemen with bonus experience points automatically baked in. And a bunch of your higher tier units, whereas with the Imperial barracks of the later tiers with the Reformed Kingdom, you literally just get your volunteer sentries and knightly order units. You're not going to be fielding nearly as many men, nor of good quality as the Legion would, because we do want to make the Legion feel like you are actually fielding an actual army. As we get down all the way to the stables, again, the Empire is not going to have a lot of stuff as far as cavalry. If you stick with the standard Imperial military, you're going to end up with just scouts, and then scouts with +1 experience, and you're going to need to build the final tier of barracks before you can get 1 Knights of the Imperial Dragon. With stables in the reformed kingdom of reformed Empire of Cyrodiil, you're going to get your knightly order units much faster, and they're going to be much higher quality than Imperial scouts ever could possibly hope to be. So the idea here is that again, we wanted to focus more on having good cavalry as the Empire if you decide to take the military reforms, and so that's the idea here, is that, hey, as a bonus, you get 1 unit of your cavalry early on, and it replenishes relatively quickly, and then once you build that final tier of stable, you're going to be just pumping out cavalry nonstop. And then we have the Bowyer line. Again, a lot of the units for the Imperial Legion, you literally just get for the Bowyer range, you just get a single unit of Legionnaire archers. The second tier gives them with 1 experience, and the third tier just gives you 2 of them that can be replenished a little bit faster. The Empire is not a range-focused faction, but what we decided to do for the military reform is we decided to give the first tier your Nibene Marines, the second tier your Colovian Bowmen, and the third tier your the Order of the Virtuous Blood. These are specifically going to be faction-wide. That is why the Knights of the Mermaid with the Javelin medium infantry are going to be region recruitment, because Nibene Marines are available everywhere. As our Colovian Bowmen and Order of the Virtuous Blood, because it's just to help balance out the idea that you do have more range options, and we can't just like, oh, you get Nibene Marines in 1 settlement in your kingdom. So we really wanted to help balance that out with the building browser here. As far as the Town Hall line, we have we're not only going to steal the idea of having the Town Hall be required to access higher tier buildings of barracks, because it just helps encourage why this building is needed. We are also going to be, the Town Hall line is going to be responsible primarily for giving you recruitment slots. So automatically, the Town Hall is going to give you 2 recruitment slots, just bar none. The next tier is going to give you 3, the next tier is going to give you 4, and by the end of the line, if you really focus on having the Town Hall be fully upgraded, you're going to be blessed with 5 recruitment slots from that building alone. And I do believe most cities, by the time they're fully upgraded, should have up to 9 recruitment slots. There should always be that option for every faction to focus that down and truly get that many slots in their list. The armor upgrades that you're going to have access to are actually rather extensive. As Sebastian said earlier, if we're just skipping to the end of it here, where we have access to half plate and full plate, you'll see the armor upgrades are rather detailed. The Order of the Virtuous Blood can get up to +3 armor. If we go all the way to the end of the Foundry, the Prefects we talked about earlier can have +2 armor, which is already scary. The Knight Protectors, Blade Masters, and Knights of the Imperial Dragon can have +2 to their armor. And then in addition, if you get a armor foundry up as the reformed Cyrodiilic feudal state, all of your units across your entire faction, except for your absolute top tier Knightly Order Cavalry and the Knights of the Imperial Dragon, are going to get a +3 to armor across the board, which is just a massive balance bump upwards for your faction. It's kind of a salve for the idea that you don't have the Legion anymore. is that you really can just slap plate armor on literally all of your units. Knights of the Stag with with +4 armor, where they initially had just +1, is going to be very, very nice indeed. Your ports, the Empire is not a particularly well-known maritime power. There are not many in the Elder Scrolls. It's not a focus like it is in Lord of the Rings, where specific factions are known for being great seafarers. Obviously, seafaring is required. Many of you will scream that the Nords and Ysgramor and his 500 were great sailors and pirates and whatever in Stros Mackay, but it's not on a faction level that any specific nation, except for the All-Married Dominion and some would say the Empire as a maritime power as far as the Navy is concerned. So we're still in the process of reworking the Navy. We probably don't need to touch it that much because naval combat in Med 2 is not important, except for,
Yeah.
transporting armies around or sniping armies that the AI is stupid enough to try to sail to your kingdom. Um, but the ports are mostly going to be used for trade and population growth, and to help, make things better. And of course, you will still have access to ships. Just, it's not going to be a main focus. We have the trade buildings, the warehouse, and the markets. Nothing really new there. It's just we're giving a raw income bonus to all of these, a la Divide and Conquer. And what we settled on is making the benefits a little bit better for the trade buildings. As you see here, the Merchant's Quarter is going to give you a raw 720 income a turn. There is nothing more annoying for me in Divide and Conquer than getting up to the higher tiers of merchant buildings and markets and seeing that it's going to boost my income by 200 a turn and the building costs over 4,000. I'm like, why? Why would I ever build that? So the Merchant's Quarter is going to be ruinously expensive. I'm guessing over 8,000, but it is going to give you a massive boost of income in addition to whatever the trade income is going to be. So if you capture a city with a Merchant's Quarter in it, you're going to be getting a lot of money just out the gate. Just by having that settlement. Then, of course, we have the farms. It's pretty self-explanatory. However, we did focus for the Empire of Cyrodiil on the farmstead and the freehold aspect, as Sebastian will tell you about ad nauseum. The big thing about Rome's promise was that the men who serve them can get land, and there are freeholds for the men to own. You actually become a quasi-feudal lord. And so we wanted to reflect that with the higher tiers of the imperial food production facilities being named like freeholds and farmsteads. So it's that idea of harkening back to ancient Rome. Roads, mines. We did decide to slap a minor penalty onto mines while boosting their normal income, because mines, while the children do yearn for them, normal people who are mentally sane do not. And so the idea of a mining network is going to reduce public happiness. And trust me, don't worry, there are plenty of ways to boost public happiness in other parts of the game. We just wanted to add a small penalty to really focusing in on mining, because you are indeed tilling out the earth. Plus, who knows how many Draugr and spiders and bears and other things are down there? I mean, there are like what?
Falmer,
Oh,
goblins.
oh, look, it's an amazing mine. I wonder what's it. And it's Blackreach.
Is always Blackreach.
It's always Blackreach. And now that I've been talking for a very, very long time, I would like Sebastian to talk about the thing how we decided to rework the church structure inside of the Empire.
Yes. Well, this is in fact mostly for the Empire, but as a general philosophy, we didn't want the base TESTW system in which you could upgrade your churches to the max level and then subsequently just recruit as many units of Divine Crusaders as you wanted. We sort of wanted to tone that back a little bit. Whether or not we have some Divine units and Divine Crusaders in the eventual subsequent releases is subject to change. Same with whether or not we include any variety of minor faction and etc. We understand that the Elder Scrolls lore is very rich. There are a lot of potential campaigns and factions to be had along the lines, and the cool thing is when we make expansions, they're free. So that is always a potentiality. But with the religion system in Cyrodiil, we decided to kind of take an idea from the Oblivion games, where you have kind of early like chantries and priories, and then way shrines, and each of those is a varying kind of size. So we have the way shrines of the divines here for your base public one public health and 0.5% culture increase, and then that's a subsequent general 1 to 0.5 increase for all things. So priories of the divines like Wayne Priory, from the base Oblivion quest, and then Chantries of the Divines, where we have like a full kind of general building dedicated to worship, which actually adds the 5% law as well as the 3 public health and the 1.5% culture. So they're just solid baseline good stat increases for your kind of divine line of buildings and wanting to increase the culture, because very much so, if you cannot assimilate a culture like Black Marsh to yours, you can at least spread the word of the divines and kind of influence culture that way.
Yes. Personally, my sort of outing remark is that I have played very little of Oblivion. I need to play more. As Sebastian has informed me that I need to play more. He has several knives that
Played
he has given me a very close look at until I
played
am going
played
to.
more with play Oblivion with a mod that fixes the leveling system or does away with it.
I
Play
actually,
Oblivion
I
with
actually,
that.
I actually want to play the game vanilla because I want to. Also, the fact that I can't mod the game for the life of me. But the idea that I initially ran into is I ran into early in my game the way shrines, and I really, really wanted to include that as a part of the game here because it's one of the first quests I ever saw. It's like, hey, go cleanse the way shrines and you get something. And I believe Sebastian has told me that it has something to do with Pilanal White Strake. But the point is, the way shrines are something we really, really wanted to include. The priories of the Chandries are really, really important as far as the imperial culture is concerned. So that's how we decided to rework the churches for the Empire. We are going to do something with the brothels and the inns and the siege workshops. The Empire is just going to have access to ballista and catapults. They're going to be very rare. We don't want people to siege engine spam, especially the AI, because they can and will have entire full stacks of mostly ballista and catapult for literally no reason. So you're going to be very, very limited on what you can get for siege weapons, but you can indeed get them if you really want them. Just build the siege works in multiple cities and you'll have all the catapults you could ever want. Brothels and inns are not going to have the ability to recruit spies and assassins, and that is something we'll talk about here in just a moment. But brothels and inns, if those of you that understand how Med2's coding works, public happiness directly attributes to population growth. So building a brothel with a +1 public happiness will automatically increase your population growth by 0.5%, and then building an inn will increase it to a further 1% and give you a small income bonus. So, Sebastian, would you like to explain our idea around agent limitations, as well as why things like, the Morag Tong and the Dark Brotherhood are not going to be as prevalent as, say, spies and assassins in Medieval 2?
Yeah, absolutely. Apart from the general gameplay concerns of not wanting sort of agent spam, whether it's from the player side or from the AI side, that kind of dulls a campaign down. Um, Lore wise, assassinations and thievery and these sort of specific criminal things are an underground element. They're not as readily sort of available as one might think in a typical sort of political scheme of things, and they're also very tied into religion, and religion is a very contentious point in certain things. So I mean, we have the Morag Tong eventually when we decide to tackle Morrowind. Not saying whether or not we have specific Morrowind ideas yet, but it's possible. Um, and the Dark Brotherhood. I mean, the Dark Brotherhood are a criminal organization that are expressly against the views of the imperial law-keeping populace generally. And so, from a lore perspective, it just makes more sense to make these things sort of precious commodities. Um, and from the gameplay perspective, we don't want people to have to deal with an overabundance of sort of agent spam. I mean, not to say that, and also we also want to give certain draw to certain factions. So I mean, if House Indoril have these great buoyant armigers and this is all conceptual, by the way, none of this is concrete. But if say in Morrowind you're beset by buoyant armigers from House Indoril and great war masters, wizard masters from House Telvanni, then House Lalu maybe getting a boost in merchant and potential assassin hiring is not out of the question in terms of balancing the game and also keeping in with this sort of lore idea of cultural values.
In addition, one of the things that we want to give is that as a boon, because assassins and spies are very, very important for certain people, certain parts of the game. As all of you, as some of you are aware, and this will be included in a little pop-up message, as sort of a beginner's guide to the mechanics of Med 2. Spies can be used to very, very quickly convert the population to your side culturally. If you stick 3 or 4 spies in a settlement, within 4 or 5 turns, it will be over 90% your culture, just because of the influence of the spies. It is an excellent thing to be able to do. Unfortunately, it would it makes expansion a lot easier than I think it should be, even though I am one of the people that absolutely abuses that when I play Divide and Conquer. Don't ask me how a Gondorian city becomes mostly Mordor culture in like less than a year. But the I
Whoa. To quote to quote the Rankin Bass animated Return of the King, where there's a whip, there's a way.
Yes, indeed. The beatings will continue until worship of the Dark Lord improves. But the point is that these buildings will specifically be for the populace to become happy in and to drink in and to do other things in. But the idea is the specific focus is going to be on just income generation and everybody being happy. And spies and assassins, when you are able to recruit them, will have access to a list of wonderful ancillaries in the form of Daedric artifacts and other special items that we are making specifically for spies and assassins, like Mehrunes Razor, and other special items that will severely boost the abilities of any special agents you do get the ability to recruit, and capturing any settlement that has one of those buildings in it. Like we said, House Hlalu having access to assassins and spies. If you should go to war with House Hlalu and capture any of those settlements, well, look at that. They have a building that lets you recruit spies and assassins. And look, when I recruit them, they're automatically level 5 or level 6 on the subterfuge scale, and they might be even better assassins or saboteurs than standard assassins. So when you do get them, it's going to be few and far between, but they are going to be very, very good at what they do. Um, Now, moving on to the special building for the Empire, one that we decided to give rather kind of last minute. We were going through the building browser for the second time, wondering what we were missing, and I slapped myself on the forehead and said a military academy for both the Imperial Legion and for the Cyrodiilic Empire. So the idea here is that regional recruitment is going to be a major focus of the specialty Cyrodiilic Reformed Empire, and you're going to need a way to retrain those units in addition to the Empire needing the ability to just field massive numbers of troops. Let's say you have all the money in the world. Like I said, you don't have enough recruitment slots. Well, you can build a military academy and a knightly fraternity. Both of them are going to allow you to retrain regional troops very, very well, a la the fiefdom barracks and fiefdom way stations from Gondor in Divide and Conquer. But you're also going to be able to have +2 recruitment slots and 2 free upkeep unit slots, and then the knightly fraternities get above that to 4+4. You heard it here, folks. If you have a max tier town hall and you have a max tier military academy, you're going to have 9 recruitment slots before you can even make a single man. So the Empire is just going to pump out endless numbers of troops, and the really high upkeep cost ones you can just stick inside these settlements with these fraternities and academies and barracks, and they are just going to sit there and drink and win against everything that comes their way. So after a very, very long-winded, I do believe the raw recording is going to be over an hour, maybe even over 2. So Sebastian, my co-developer, I would like to say this at the closing of this entire video. First off, thank you for sitting through the entire video. I know there have been several people that have come to me over Discord, because I'm the one who put my Discord credentials out there on the page, asking many questions. Several friends of mine who are interested in my work and the Elder Scrolls work have come to us and asked questions about our project and shown great enthusiasm for it. I want to say thank you all for listening, if you have indeed listened this long to both of us ramble on. I will fully admit, as I will to everyone, I started this project about 2 years ago by myself, writing up bits and pieces of this doc. This project belongs to myself and Sebastian. This is not simply my thing. I will never, ever, to the day I die, take full credit for this project, because Sebastian is my co-developer. He and I own this together, and I would be absolutely nowhere if it was not for my co-developer Sebastian. So on that note, thank you very much, Sebastian, for literally at the drop of a hat deciding to record this multi-hour long discussion about our personal passion project.
Oh man, I wouldn't miss it for the world. I really enjoy the capacity that we have for making something really tangible and really enjoyable here. I mean, I think there is a a joy that comes with having a sort of hankering or like a craving for a game fulfilled by something that you find through recommendation. I think there's something else entirely in, I think, finding a desire for something and creating the solution to that yourself and sharing it with others. It's my first undertaking of that sort, and there's no one else I would rather undertake that with.
Well, thank you very much, Sebastian. I appreciate you greatly. And again, to the users at home, this project, The Elder Scrolls Total War Remastered, it does not have a scheduled release date. It does not have a official Discord that you can join at this time. This developer diary was simply done as for both of us to kind of show off the work that we are proud of. We are working on this project at least once a week, if not more than once. And as it stands, we are completely ready to launch the beta once we actually code in all the changes we want. The only thing we have left to do are, as I have said in the actual mod document, reworking literally every single trait and ancillary in the game. We have barely begun to scratch the surface on that, and we've already been working on it for several months. Sebastian understands the level of work we're committing to with that, but it is, at the end of the day, fun work to be able to code on that and then actually implement the changes we have for the Imperial roster here. Sebastian, last words before we let the fine folks actually get on with their lives.
It has been a great pleasure to show you this many hours of content for what is a fraction of our work. We are nerds at heart, and we have put so much of our passion and our soul into making this project something that was originally high concept into something tangible. We take great pride in that, and we take great pride in sharing a love of potential with this. There are limitations with being a small team, but in being a small team, you are also given so much more creative freedom. And I know that a lot of us as Elder Scrolls fans have a bubbling need to see each of our personal fan favorites represented somehow. And there is a great deal of excitement that I feel in knowing that in enough time and enough consistent work on a project like this, it can potentially happen. And it's something that I look forward to greatly.
And if I have my way, it will happen. So, like I've said before, the initial open beta, and it will be an open beta for everybody to play, everybody to enjoy as much as they want. The beta will be the Skyrim Civil War. That will be our bug testing phase because we will be playing this and then alpha testing it among us and maybe of a few friends, excuse me, but then we will just be straight up dropping the fully completed Skyrim Stormcloaks and Empire of Cyrodiil directly onto all of you guys and asking you guys if you think this is great or, maybe if some things need some balance changes, and then eventually releasing the entire 1.0 project. But we thank you all very much for tuning in, listening to us ramble about our passion project of several years, and we wish all of you a good night, and well, let's hope this thing's done before Elder Scrolls 6, because at this point I'm not very hopeful. Good night, Sebastian.
Good night.